Chapter 4675. From the third level of the Dragon Emperor Divine Dragon Inheritance Blood Essence to the fourth level of the Dragon Emperor, Kong Shinmu felt that his strength had almost doubled. This was an extremely terrifying improvement. Previously, he had to join hands with Lin Xiaotian, the boundless thief demon god, in order to kill Zhou Jingyun, the Dragon Emperor's mentor on the 7th floor of the Dragon Emperor Palace. However now, he could suppress an opponent of Zhou Jingyun's level by himself. Although he had not cultivated the 9th level of the extreme Tao Hui Dragon Explosion to a higher level, he could already suppress the ordinary 7th level of the Dragon Emperor with the improvement of the Divine Dragon Essence Blood. Of course, it was still difficult to fight the 8th level of the Dragon Emperor, especially the older generation of the Dragon Emperor 8th level. Basically, their cultivation had reached the peak of the 9th level of the Reincarnation Tribulation Realm. This gap was still very big. Even for some of the older generation, the 7th level of the Dragon Emperor 7th level was still a little difficult for Kong Shinmu. This was not the Dragon Martial Continent. In the Dragon Martial Continent, the Dragon Emperor mentor, Zhou Jingyun, was in existence who did not cultivate the Holy Spirit Dragon Martial technique. Her real combat power in the Dragon God's world was probably only about the same as the ordinary 6th level of the Dragon Emperor 6th level, or even worse. It should be known that the Dragon Emperor level experts in the Dragon God's world would basically cultivate the Holy Spirit Dragon Martial technique, and they had cultivated it for a long time. If they cultivated this level of Dragon Martial technique to the peak of the heaven level, then their strength would not be comparable to Zhou Jingyun at all. Therefore, Kong Shinmu must become stronger and make his strength more stable. Of course, after this breakthrough, he still needed a little rest to consolidate his strength. It was best to consolidate his strength when he had just broken through. This was the most efficient time to consolidate his strength. Just as Kong Shinmu was consolidating his strength, Xiao Bai, surrounded by many people, had returned to the inn. She did not want to pay attention to those people, but they had to give her gifts. This matter was also strange. She chose to break through to the 5th level of the Reincarnation Tribulation Realm when she went to break through to the next level. She easily killed the first Reincarnation Beast. Then, she continued to challenge the second Reincarnation Beast. It was also at this time that many dragon martial artists in the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice City began to pay attention to her. It was rare to see someone who could challenge a second reincarnation behemoth at the 4th stage of the Rebirth Tribulation Realm. In the end, Whitey only managed to kill the second reincarnation beast with great difficulty. She had cultivated the high-grade Holy Spirit Dragon's martial technique, Ice Dragon Pagoda suppressing mountains and rivers. Furthermore, she had already cultivated it to the 30th level, and was able to condense a 30th level Ice Dragon Pagoda. Compared to other dragon martial techniques, the cultivation process of this Ice Dragon Myriad Pagoda suppressing mountains and rivers was different. There were a total of 10,000 levels, and the cultivation difficulty of each level was the same. With every increase in level, he would be able to condense an additional level of Ice Dragon Pagoda, and its suppressive power would be twice as strong. If she cultivated it to the 10th level, she would be able to condense a 10,000 level Ice Dragon Pagoda. Then, she would be almost invincible in the Dragon Emperor realm. For example, Kong Shinmu's 9th level Extreme Dao Horseshoe Dragon Explosion was almost equivalent to the peak strength of the Dragon Emperor realm after cultivating it to the 9th level. Therefore, Xiao Bai used the 30th level Ice Dragon Pagoda to suppress the second reincarnation beast. Of course, the process was not so smooth. She also used it repeatedly and used other techniques. Most importantly, even her human-grade Holy Spirit Dragon weapon, the 10,000 Dragon Mystic Ice Blade Chi, was completely shattered by the reincarnation beast. After paying such a price, Xiao Bai finally killed the second reincarnation beast. The reincarnation behemoth, which had broken through to the 5th stage of the Rebirth Tribulation Realm, was already extremely powerful. Xiao Bai had such combat strength. Furthermore, after condensing the reincarnation power, her strength would definitely increase further. This time, her cultivation base had increased by 2 stages. One could imagine the increase in her strength. Some onlookers predicted that with Xiao Bai's current strength, it was possible for her to pass the 3rd level of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Tower. One had to know that Xiao Bai was only at the 3rd stage of the Dragon Emperor realm. If she could reach the 4th stage of the Dragon Emperor realm, with Xiao Bai's current strength, it would not be a problem for her to pass the 3rd stage of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Tower. This time, she naturally planned to break through the grade of the Divine Dragon Essence Blood. However, on her way back, many dragon martial artists ran over to befriend her. Some of the older generation wanted to befriend her, while some of the younger generation wanted to woo her. They all wanted to give her gifts, such as a pendant that condensed the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, a mysterious dragon weapon that could consolidate one's strength. There were countless treasures. Xiaobai did not accept any of them, because she knew what those people were planning. Once she accepted their things, she would be taking advantage of them. In the future, if those people wanted her to help them with anything, she would have to consider it carefully. Therefore, she rejected all of them. Some of the older generation wanted to be matchmakers for their sons, while most of the younger generation wanted to woo her personally. Many of these people came from influential families in the Five Extremes Mysterious Eye City, and they all had super divine dragons in their families. In their opinion, Qi Xiaobai did not seem to have any background, so if they came forward to woo her, Qi Xiaobai should give them face, right? They did not expect that Xiaobai did not intend to take care of them at all. Many dragon martial artists chased her all the way to the entrance of the inn. I know, Miss Xiaobai just doesn't know who to choose. There are so many of us. Miss Xiaobai just came from the dragon martial continent. How would she know who we are? That's right, let's give Miss Xiaobai some time and let her familiarize herself with our vast dragon god's world first. Haha. These people had a certain attitude of mockery towards the dragon martial continent, because there were very few strong dragon martial artists there. It was difficult to come up with a super divine dragon, so what qualifications did it have to attract their attention? The dragon martial continent itself existed to cultivate super divine dragons, and in recent years, there was basically only one genius who reached the level of super divine dragon every 4 or 5 years, which was too little. Therefore, the dragon martial continent had no value to the dragon god's great world. If Kong Xinmu had not killed Susan Luo this time, perhaps it would have been taken away by the alliance of the 9 major races. Hearing these people's words, Xiaobai also felt a little uncomfortable. She rolled her eyes and thought of a way. She knew that Kong Xinmu would soon break through the realm, so she pretended to be indifferent and said to the people around her, "Don't be too full of yourself. My heart already belongs to someone. He is a man of indomitable spirit, and in terms of talent, he surpasses all of you." As soon as these words came out, everyone's face changed. What a slap in the face. Chapter 4676. She already had someone in her heart? When the young talents heard Xiaobai's words, they felt as if they had been struck by lightning. Xiaobai came up from the dragon martial continent, and they heard that she had just arrived not long ago. How could she have found someone she liked so quickly? However, they quickly realized that the person Little White was talking about was not someone from the great world of the dragon gods. I heard that there was another young genius who came up to the dragon god's world with Miss Xiaobai. Could it be that the person Xiaobai likes is that young genius? One of the young men said, emphasizing the word genius, with a smile on his face. In his opinion, what kind of genius could there be in the dragon martial continent? Who here was not a top genius when they came to the dragon martial continent? Take the young man who spoke for example. He was only 20 years old this year, and he was already at the 3rd level of the Dragon Emperor. He was already a second-class disciple of the Holy Land of 5 Extremes Black Ice. With his current cultivation level, he was still not good enough to pursue Little White. However, he had great potential. The Divine Dragon Blood Essence compatibility that he tested was 58, which meant that he could cultivate all the way to the 8th level of the Dragon Emperor. At this distance, he was not far from the Super Shenron. The level of the Super Shenron was considered a top figure in the Dragon God's world. It was an existence that could become a 6th-class disciple of the Holy Land of 5 Extremes Black Ice. So, it must be said that this young man felt that he had a great future and was extremely bright. How could someone from the Dragon Martial Continent have such talent? Generally speaking, among the Dragon Martial artists who came up from the Dragon Martial Continent, there would only be one Super Shenron every 5 years or so. It couldn't be the young man who came up with Xiaobai, could it? However, their horizons were still too narrow. Kong Xinmu's horizons had already covered all the major races in the world. The level of the Super Shenron was something that Kong Xinmu would definitely reach. But in the eyes of these people, the Super Shenron was already the end. To put it simply, he was not even worthy of Xiaobai. When Xiaobai heard the young man's question, she did not refute. She just smiled faintly and turned around to enter the inn. Of course, the others wouldn't follow them into the inn, but they still scoffed at the words left behind by Xiaobai. They sent people to guard the entrance of the inn, and ordered them to inform them if the young man mentioned by Xueqi appeared. That night, Kong Xinmu and Xueqi met and talked to each other. Kong Xinmu, with your current strength, it should not be too difficult for you to defeat the second reincarnation beast. However, I am only dealing with a reincarnation beast at the 3rd level of the Dragon Emperor. Now that you have broken through to the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor, I don't know how much stronger the reincarnation beast will become. What Xueqi said made sense. This was the reason why Xueqi wanted to break through her cultivation realm first, and not raise the grade of the divine dragon blood essence first. The strength of the reincarnation beast that a dragon martial artist faced was different depending on the grade of the divine dragon's blood essence. The reincarnation beast that Xueqi faced at the 3rd level of the Dragon Emperor was already very strong. Meanwhile, Kong Xinmu had already reached the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor. The reincarnation beast was definitely 1 level stronger. Next, Xueqi had to think about breaking through to the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor. In the underground training ground of the inn, the Dragon Mark had sufficient energy. She could cultivate non-stop. She believed that the day of her transformation would come soon. It would be best if she could break through before the opening of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Tower. Okay. Kong Xinmu nodded. He didn't know much about the strength of the reincarnation beast, but if he broke through to the 5th level of the reincarnation realm, he would definitely have to kill the 2nd reincarnation beast. Right now, he was only at the 3rd level of the reincarnation realm. However, he could use the Phoenix Spirit Fire Rock to break through 2 levels of cultivation. Furthermore, the Phoenix Spirit Fire Rock could condense the energy of the Dragon Mark for him to devour to consolidate the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor's blood essence. Early the next morning, he separated from Xueqi and left the inn alone. He headed to the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice City, a place specially prepared for dragon martial artists to break through to the next level. That place was called the Rising Dragon Plaza, and it was a property run by a private family. When Kong Xinmu headed to the Rising Dragon Plaza, the news spread quickly. Many people's subordinates were waiting at the entrance of the inn where Kong Xinmu resided. When they saw Kong Xinmu appear, they immediately spread the news. These subordinates naturally didn't recognize Kong Xinmu and didn't know that he was with Xueqi. But the innkeeper knew. Therefore, Kong Xinmu's identity couldn't be hidden anymore. He was the genius who had come up from the Dragon Martial Continent with Xueqi. Of course, not many people knew that Kong Xinmu had killed the genius of the Void Human tribe, Susan Luo. Soon, Kong Xinmu arrived at the Rising Dragon Plaza. There were already many young geniuses from various families watching at the Rising Dragon Plaza. It even attracted many young ladies from various families. These girls also wanted to see what kind of talent this young man from the Martial Dragon Continent, who was said to be a genius, had. However, they didn't have high expectations. It was just that some geniuses from various families liked to join in on the fun. Many young ladies came together and looked into the Rising Dragon Plaza. Soon, they saw Kong Xinmu's black-clothed figure appear in the plaza. Instantly, many young ladies were somewhat disappointed. Why was this so-called young genius only at the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor? Most importantly, his cultivation was only at the 3rd level of the reincarnation realm. Then what was so interesting about his breakthrough? There was a group of young ladies watching from around the Rising Dragon Plaza. They were from one of the 7 great families of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice City. Among the 3 girls, the one in the middle was wearing a veil, revealing a pair of beautiful eyes that were as calm as an ancient well. Her expression was incomparably calm. She wasn't interested in watching Kong Xinmu's breakthrough. However, it was said that her cousin had taken a fancy to the genius girl from the Dragon Martial Continent, Xueqi. Unfortunately, Xueqi had said that she had someone she liked. Therefore, this young lady was very curious. Who was the person she liked? When she saw Kong Xinmu's figure, she was instantly disappointed. Judging from Kong Xinmu's appearance, his strength and talent couldn't even compare to Xueqi's. Even Xueqi couldn't compare to him. Yet he was the person that Xueqi liked? This young lady's name was Gu Xinyue. She was a 5th-class disciple of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. She possessed the essence blood of the 9th level of the Dragon Emperor's inheritance. She was still young, but her talent was extraordinary. She was the precious daughter of the Gu family, one of the 7 great families of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice City. Chapter 4677. Cousin, why don't we go back? I didn't expect Kong Shinmu to only be at the third level of the Dragon Emperor. What's there to see? One of Gu Xinyue's cousins said with some disappointment. It could be said that almost all the dragon martial artists present had a higher cultivation realm than Kong Shinmu. Therefore, it was normal for them to be disappointed in Kong Shinmu. Many young talents at the scene had already started to mock him. This was the person that Xiaobai liked? He was so weak. However, Gu Xinyue's face, which was covered by a veil, was expressionless. She shook her head and said softly, "Since we're here, let's finish watching." It wasn't that she had high hopes for Kong Shinmu, but she liked to finish what she started and would never give up halfway. Since she was here today, she had to be responsible for her actions. Kong Shinmu was her cousin's love rival. Since she had agreed to come, she had to understand Kong Shinmu's character. Otherwise, why would she come here? Although Kong Shinmu was only at the third level of the Dragon Emperor, which disappointed Gu Xinyue, she didn't look down on Kong Shinmu. After all, cultivation realm didn't mean anything. As long as all the dragon martial artists didn't die prematurely, they would eventually reach the 9th level of the rebirth realm. In comparison, the divine dragon's blood essence was the most important thing. Whether Jiang Xinwu had talent or not, it could not be seen from her cultivation realm. It mainly depended on her talent, compatibility, and the level of her standard. At the scene, Kong Shinmu didn't expect that he would attract so much attention just by coming to the Rising Dragon Square for a breakthrough. Could it be that Ren had spread the news about him? However, Kong Shinmu thought about it and felt that it wasn't right. He listened to the whispers of the crowd and discovered that these people had actually come because of Xiaobai's words. The day before, Xiaobai had killed the second reincarnation beast in the Rising Dragon Plaza. This had shocked many people. At the very least, there were very few dragon martialists from the dragon martial continent who could condense reincarnation power. But Xiaobai did it. This kind of thing, even many geniuses of the dragon god's great world had to put in a lot of hard work to achieve. Therefore, Xiaobai became popular in the 5 Extremes Profound Ice City. Immediately after, her words also brought Kong Shinmu to fame. This made Kong Shinmu feel somewhat helpless. This lass, however, let her say what she wanted. Anyway, there were many people watching, and it wouldn't affect Kong Shinmu's performance. Kong Shinmu was already incomparably used to this kind of situation. Anyway, this Rising Dragon Square was surrounded by a barrier set up by a supreme divine dragon. Ordinary people couldn't possibly disturb his breakthrough. And supreme divine dragon level. Why would they have the time to pay attention to a small fry like him? Therefore, Jiang Xinwu quickly adjusted his state of mind and treated everyone around him as if they were nothing, completely ignoring them. When he stepped into the scene, there were already many people around him who had left in disappointment. Those people felt that Xiaobai's taste was too poor. She actually took a fancy to Kong Shinmu, a young man who was only at the 3rd level of the rebirth realm, whose cultivation was even lower than Xiaobai's. She even said that his talent surpassed everyone in the 5 Extremes Profound Ice City. Therefore, they left in disappointment. However, Kong Shinmu didn't care. They could come and go as they pleased. It had nothing to do with him. When he reached the scene, he finally transformed into a dragon. His 3,000 zhong long, pitch-black body appeared on the Rising Dragon Square. In such a vast area, Kong Shinmu directly took out the Phoenix Spirit Firestone and activated its power. It was time to break through. Instantly, the surrounding spiritual chi of heaven and earth surged toward where Kong Shinmu's black dragon body was, accompanied by the relatively dense energy of the dragon mark. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth formed a series of vortexes that were directly devoured by Kong Shinmu. What is that? It seems to be some kind of treasure that gathers spiritual chi of heaven and earth. It's too powerful. There seems to be the aura of a foreign tribe. Is that a treasure from a foreign tribe? This Kong Shinmu is actually using a treasure from a foreign tribe. That's normal. I heard that the Dragon Martial Continent is currently facing the invasion of the 9 major tribes. It's normal for them to secretly collude with the 9 major tribes. What a pity. Using such a method to break through is really laughable. Many people couldn't help but mock him. Previously, Xiaobai hadn't used the Phoenix Spirit Firestone because she had been stuck at the 4th level for a long time. She could have broken through long ago if she had wanted to. However, Kong Shinmu still needed to devour some treasures before he could break through. The Phoenix Spirit Firestone could allow him to break through 2 levels in one go. Boom! After a loud explosion, a vortex of black clouds appeared in the sky above the rising dragon square. A reincarnation beast covered in raging flames emerged from the vortex. The reincarnation beast was like a flaming lion. When it appeared, the temperature of the entire rising dragon square rose several times. However, the spectators didn't seem to be surprised. After all, they were all very powerful dragon martial artists. Jiang Shenwu's Samsara beast, which was at the third stage of the Samsara tribulation realm, was nothing to them. Many people's expressions didn't even change. Even an ordinary dragon martialist could easily break through to the fourth level. No matter how weak Kong Shinmu was, he shouldn't have been killed by a reincarnation beast. In fact, that was indeed the case. Kong Shinmu naturally didn't care about this reincarnation beast. This reincarnation beast's strength was equivalent to a fourth-level dragon emperor's. It was too easy for Kong Shinmu to deal with it. However, no one had expected that Kong Shinmu would be able to deal with this reincarnation beast so easily. Devouring power, explode, void dragon sky raising strike. The void dragon raises the sky break was an offensive dragon martial art technique. It was a very simple primary source dragon martial art technique. Even in the great world of the dragon gods, this kind of dragon martial art technique was only practiced by the relatively poor dragon kings. Which dragon emperor didn't cultivate the Holy Spirit dragon technique? However, it was this simple low-level origin source dragon technique, void dragon sky raising strike. 6 streaks of dark dragon breath engulfed the reincarnation beast completely. The terrifying power actually penetrated the reincarnation beast in an instant. The reincarnation beast had just appeared, and its flames hadn't even covered the entire area when it was completely smashed into pieces by Kong Shinmu's attack. Although it was only a low-level origin source dragon technique, Kong Shinmu's devouring power was already too strong. During the Nirvana tribulation realm, he would condense Nirvana power every time he broke through. Furthermore, the nature of the devouring power was already relatively strong. The destructive power of the void dragon sky raising strike alone wouldn't be able to destroy this reincarnation beast. However, the special characteristic of the devouring power was that it could devour all the power contained in the reincarnation beast into Kong Shinmu's body, causing it to disintegrate. Chapter 4678. Breakthrough to the fourth tier of the rebirth tribulation realm. In the rising dragon square, Kong Shinmu had successfully broken through to the fourth tier of the rebirth tribulation realm after transforming into a dragon for less than 10 minutes. This scene caused everyone's expression to change slightly. This lad's combat power seemed to be quite strong. He could even display the power of a primary source dragon technique to destroy the reincarnation behemoth. To everyone present, this was something that was rather shocking. In the past, there were dragon martial artists from the dragon martial continent and other small worlds. However, the techniques they used were all high-level primary source dragon techniques. For example, Xiaobai had also used the ice-splitting sky-breaking slash. However, Kong Shinmu had actually used the primary source dragon technique to kill the reincarnation behemoth. This also meant that Kong Shinmu's innate talent was extremely strong. It was likely that all his Nirvana power had been condensed during the Nirvana tribulation realm. From the fourth tier of the Nirvana tribulation realm onward, he had killed 2 Nirvana behemoths every time he broke through. He was definitely a powerful person. However, there were still some people present who did not realize this. They were even chatting and laughing with each other. This Kong Shinmu can condense Nirvana power at the Nirvana tribulation realm, but it does not mean that he can condense Samsara power. That's right. Yesterday, Xiaobai barely managed to kill the second reincarnation behemoth. It will not be easy for this Kong Shinmu to deal with the second reincarnation behemoth in the future. He is still not worthy of Xiaobai. He is not worthy of competing with us. Most people said indifferently and turned to leave. However, when Gu Xinyue saw that Kong Shinmu had actually used the primary source dragon technique to kill the reincarnation behemoth, a strange look appeared in her calm eyes. She felt that Kong Shinmu was far from using his full strength. To Kong Shinmu, breaking through to the next tier was as easy as eating and drinking. However, she didn't think that Kong Shinmu was very talented. After all, she was already at the 9th level of the Dragon Emperor and had yet to encounter any bottlenecks. Her divine dragon blood essence compatibility was 61, which meant that she could directly break through to the first level of the Super Dragon God. Unlike the Dragon Warriors with a compatibility of 60, They needed some luck to break through to the level of the Super Shenron's inheritance blood essence. However, Gu Xinyue did not need that. She knew that as long as she cultivated step by step, she would be able to reach the first level of the Super Dragon God. This level was indeed something that the juniors of the third and fourth levels of the Dragon Emperor had to look up to. Therefore, Gu Xinyue had seen many geniuses like Kong Xinmu. But this alone couldn't move her. Compared with her cousin, Kong Xinmu was still inferior. She turned around and wanted to leave as well. Today, Kong Xinmu had already broken through to the fourth level of the rebirth realm. From the third to the fourth level, there wouldn't be a second reincarnation beast. Therefore, everyone in the field was planning to leave. Their impression of Jiang Xinwu had changed a little. They felt that he might be a little genius, but if one were to say that he was exceptionally talented, he would definitely not be able to be considered as outstanding. However, just as everyone was about to leave, they felt that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the rising dragon square did not dissipate. Instead, it became more and more condensed. The terrifying power gathered towards Kong Xinmu's black dragon body. He didn't choose to leave. Instead, he planned to use the power of the Phoenix Spirit Firestone to break through to the fifth level of the rebirth realm. Moreover, he wanted to kill the second reincarnation beast like Xiao Bai and obtain 2 chances to condense the power of reincarnation. Although he had just broken through to the fourth level of the rebirth realm, his strength was still about the same as when he was at the third level of the rebirth realm. He didn't have time to consolidate his strength, so he could only use less than half of his strength after his breakthrough. However, he didn't plan to consolidate his strength now. He planned to raise his realm twice in a row and consolidate his strength at the same time. As a result, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the field became even denser. All of it was absorbed into Kong Xinmu's body and gathered in his limbs and bones. The aura of his black dragon body continued to rise rapidly. Everyone couldn't help but turn around when they saw this. The girls, including Gu Xinyue, also turned around and looked at the rising dragon square in surprise. He's going to make another breakthrough? Everyone thought of this possibility, but they subconsciously felt that it was a little unbelievable. It wasn't that no one could make consecutive breakthroughs, but it wasn't necessary. After breaking through to the next level, his strength hadn't been consolidated yet. Therefore, it would be good if he could use half of his strength. Therefore, it wasn't necessary. Moreover, Kong Xinmu's next step was to break through to the fifth level of the rebirth realm. A second reincarnation beast would appear at that time. If Kong Xinmu made a breakthrough now, wouldn't it be equivalent to giving up on the second reincarnation beast? In the opinion of many dragon martial artists, it would be impossible for them to defeat the second reincarnation behemoth if they had made successive breakthroughs without stabilizing their strength. However, those young geniuses all laughed out loud. Indeed, this kid is just a mediocre person. He even gave up on the chance to defeat a second reincarnation beast. He's thinking of breaking through more levels and obtaining better results when the Sacred Tower of 5 Extremes mysterious ice opens in 4 days. What a pity. Even if he makes consecutive breakthroughs now, he still doesn't have time to consolidate his strength. He won't be able to unleash much of his strength in the Sacred Tower. However, a breakthrough is better than no breakthrough at all. Now that he has made 2 consecutive breakthroughs, he might really be able to pass 1 more level in the Sacred Tower. Maybe he can pass the 3rd level and become a 3rd-class disciple? This result is already very good. It's a pity that his talent is still lacking compared to Xiao Bai's. In the end, he still gave up on killing a second reincarnation beast. The opportunity to condense samsara power is extremely limited, and it represents a person's future achievements. The last sentence was, in a sense, not wrong. The degree of condensation of the samsara power indeed represented a dragon martial artist's achievements. However, this was limited to dragon martial artists who couldn't break through to the super divine dragon level. Once one broke through to the super divine dragon level, the degree of condensation of the samsara power wouldn't be that decisive. Of course, it was still useful. If all 5 samsara power were condensed, it would roughly increase the strength of a super divine dragon by about 20%. Furthermore, Kong Xinmu wouldn't give up on killing a second reincarnation beast. It could only be said that these spectators had no idea about Kong Xinmu's strength. Chapter 4679. In Kong Xinmu's opinion, this was all part of his plan. It wasn't something he had come up with on the spur of the moment. Just as everyone turned around to look at him, Several circles of heaven and earth spirit energy had already gathered around the pitch-black divine dragon that he had transformed into. The heaven and earth spirit energy had gathered to form several layers of tornadoes that were waiting to be devoured by him. If it had been anyone else, they would have needed a few days to absorb all the heaven and earth spirit energy. However, for Kong Shin-mu, his devouring power was the best tool to absorb the heaven and earth spirit energy. Furthermore, the Phoenix Spirit Firestone had also gathered a lot of Dragon Mark energy. After all, the Dragon Mark energy in the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice City was quite rich. The rich Dragon Mark energy helped Kong Shin-mu to continuously consolidate his 4th-level Dragon Emperor blood essence. Many people present noticed this phenomenon and guessed that Kong Shin-mu had only broken through to the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor blood essence not long ago. He probably wouldn't even be able to unleash half of the power of the 4th-level Dragon Emperor blood essence, right? Compared to an ordinary 4th-level Dragon Emperor martial artist, his combat strength was definitely much weaker. It seems like this fellow really doesn't intend to kill a second reincarnation beast. It could only be said that they really knew nothing about power. The process of Kong Shin-mu's continuous devouring of the heaven and earth spirit energy was already very terrifying in the eyes of some powerful people. For example, Gu Xinyue's expression turned grave when she saw the speed at which Kong Shin-mu was devouring the heaven and earth spirit energy. She had never heard of such a speed of absorbing the spiritual energy of the world. Even if she possessed the Phoenix Spirit Fire Rock, she would probably need a few days to completely absorb the spiritual energy within the spiritual energy storm of the world. However, Kong Shin-mu. In just 5 minutes, he had completely devoured the heaven and earth spirit energy storm. Then, the aura of the entire Black Dragon skyrocketed. The aura of the Black Dragon's body started to rise from the 4th level of the Reincarnation Tribulation Realm to the 5th level. This process was so fast that the surrounding people didn't even have time to react. Kong Shin-mu was already trying to break through to the 5th level of the Reincarnation Tribulation Realm. At the same time, a flaming beast that was almost twice as powerful as the previous reincarnation beast appeared in the sky above the rising dragon square. The appearance of this gigantic flaming beast had everyone in the surroundings stumped. After all, they had only been guessing previously. However, when they saw the reincarnation beast, they knew that Zhang Shenwu was really planning to break through 2 cultivation levels consecutively. This was simply courting death. It wasn't that it was impossible, but that Zhang Shenwu would lose the possibility of killing a second reincarnation behemoth. This way, Kong Shin-mu would lose the chance of killing a second reincarnation spirit energy reincarnation. For a dragon monarch, every time they condensed the power of samsara, it was equivalent to breaking through a realm. If they reached the peak of the 9th stage of the samsara realm and condensed the power of samsara 5 times, then the strength of such a dragon martial artist would be more than 50% stronger than an ordinary dragon martial artist. Therefore, the disciples of the 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land wouldn't slack off in their cultivation. This was related to the upper limit of one's strength. However, in their eyes, it was a pity that Kong Shin-mu had given up on such an opportunity. In their opinion, Kong Shin-mu had just broken through to the 4th level of the Rebirth Tribulation Realm and had yet to consolidate his cultivation. Moreover, the Divine Dragon's Inheritance blood essence had just broken through to the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor and had yet to consolidate. The gap between the two was huge. It was almost impossible to kill a second reincarnation beast with such a gap. However, how could they know how confident Kong Shin-mu was? The first reincarnation beast to break through to the 5th level of the Reincarnation Tribulation Realm. Kong Shin-mu lifted his head and looked at the reincarnation beast above his head. This fellow was much stronger than the previous reincarnation beast. It definitely couldn't be defeated by the Void Dragon raising the skybreak. Since that was the case, 9th level Ultimate Dao Flood Dragon Burst. Kong Shin-mu's 9th level Ultimate Dao Flood Dragon Burst was cultivated to the 3rd level. 3 consecutive dark light explosions were unleashed at this moment. At the same time, he used the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body technique to attack. When he used the Void Dragon raising the skybreak to kill the reincarnation beast, it was also in an offensive state. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so destructive. After all, it was just a low-grade Origin Source Dragon martial technique. But now, he had directly jumped from the low-grade Origin Source Dragon martial technique to the high-grade Divine Spirit Dragon martial technique. The level of this Dragon martial technique had increased by 6 levels in an instant. The appearance of this scene caused the eyes of the surrounding dragon martial artists to reveal a hint of surprise and fervor. A high-grade Divine Spirit Dragon martial technique. A dragon martial technique of this level was extremely precious to the disciples of the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. It was worth around 1,000 golden dragon coins. Even a large family clan might not be able to casually take it out. The disciples of the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land aimed to obtain a high-grade divine spirit dragon martial technique before reaching the super mystical dragon level. They would have to work hard for a few years before they could obtain it, and that was only if they were lucky. But now, not only did Kong Shinmu possess a high-grade divine spirit dragon martial technique, but he had also cultivated it to a pretty good level. 9th level Ultimate Dao Flood Dragon Burst was a total of 9 levels. Now that Kong Shinmu could already unleash 3 levels, the destructive power he could unleash was definitely not weak. This meant that Kong Shinmu had obtained this high-grade divine spirit dragon martial technique for a long time. Under everyone's shocked and envious gazes, Jiang Shenwu struck out with a move. Triple Black Dragon Light Burst instantly erupted. As the power of the divine dragon tyrant body condensed in an offensive state, the 3rd Dark Dragon Burst almost instantly blew up the reincarnation beast. The terrifying power directly tore the reincarnation beast into pieces. It didn't have the slightest ability to resist. This scene caused the surrounding people to be completely stunned. This Kong Shinmu was actually so powerful. Even an ordinary reincarnation beast wouldn't be killed so easily, right? When other people broke through, they would need to fight with the reincarnation beast for a period of time before they could kill it. However, Kong Shinmu killed it instantly every time he appeared. Just based on this alone, they couldn't deny Kong Shinmu's talent and combat power. However, everyone, including Gu Xinyue, was very confused. Kong Shinmu was clearly talented, but why was he so stupid? He actually gave up on killing the 2nd reincarnation beast and gave up on the opportunity to condense the samsara power? Gu Xinyue was very clear that based on the strength that Kong Shinmu had displayed, it would be extremely difficult for him to kill the 2nd reincarnation beast, even if it was a high-grade divine spirit dragon martial technique. It could even be said that it was almost impossible. However, apart from the high-grade divine spirit dragon martial technique, Kong Shinmu would at most have the assistance of a dragon weapon. The possibility of him killing the 2nd reincarnation beast was not high. Gu Xinyue sighed. It was a pity that such a genius had actually given up on the opportunity to condense the samsara power. Chapter 4680. In everyone's opinion, it was almost impossible for Kong Shinmu to kill the 2nd reincarnation beast. That was because the 2nd reincarnation beast was definitely several times stronger than the first one. It was even possible for it to be 4 or 5 times stronger. It was definitely not something that an ordinary person could deal with. Even Xiao Bai did not dare to break through the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor before facing the 2nd reincarnation beast. She had also cultivated the high-level Holy Spirit Dragon martial technique. In this aspect, she had an advantage over the many young geniuses in the 5 extremes mysterious Ice City. However, even she had a hard time winning. However, no one knew what terrifying techniques Kong Shinmu had. When he killed the 1st reincarnation behemoth with the 9 ultimate Dao roaring dragon explosion, the 2nd reincarnation behemoth immediately appeared. Most people would have given up at this point. They would have removed their divine dragon form and the 2nd reincarnation behemoth would have dissipated. However, Kong Shinmu did not remove his divine dragon form. He still maintained his black dragon form and floated in the air above the rising dragon square. What is he trying to do? Is he trying to deal with the 2nd reincarnation beast? That's impossible. He has just broken through. How can he deal with a reincarnation beast of this level? But he did not remove his divine dragon form. Moreover, his aura is still increasing. I'm afraid he really intends to deal with this reincarnation beast. The expressions of everyone, including Gu Xinyue, changed drastically. They had originally thought that Kong Shinmu would not be able to deal with the 2nd reincarnation beast. However, Kong Shinmu's current stance was like a slap to their faces. He actually wanted to deal with the 2nd reincarnation beast. This was simply unbelievable. Everyone could not help but scoff. They felt that Kong Shinmu was too arrogant. Even Gu Xinyue, who had previously thought that Kong Shinmu was a promising talent, now felt that Kong Shinmu did not have a clear understanding of himself. The 2nd reincarnation beast did not wait for Kong Shinmu to prepare. As soon as it condensed into appearance, it erupted with a wave of ferocious attacks, and it transformed into a flaming whirlwind that descended from the sky and swept towards the black dragon that Kong Shinmu had transformed into. A terrifying pressure. Even the people outside the Rising Dragon Square could feel the terrifying power of this reincarnation beast. This power was probably equivalent to a powerful existence on the 7th level of the Dragon Emperor. Was this really something an ordinary Dragon Emperor level 4 Kong Shinmu could deal with? Moreover, Kong Shinmu seemed to have just broken through to the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor and had yet to consolidate his cultivation. In everyone's opinion, Kong Shinmu was likely to be killed by the reincarnation behemoth. But soon, everyone was shocked. They saw that the violent flaming whirlwind bombarded Kong Shinmu's divine dragon body, but it could not break through Kong Shinmu's defense. They clearly hadn't seen Jiang Xunwu use any powerful defensive techniques. He had merely used his divine dragon body to block the reincarnation behemoth's attack with his physical body. Terrifying. Shocking. Everyone finally changed their opinion of Kong Shinmu. This scene alone proved that Kong Shinmu was not an ignorant brat. He had a clear understanding of his own strength. Kong Shinmu used the divine dragon tyrant body technique and activated the guardian stance. In this state, the power of the divine dragon tyrant body enveloped his entire body, making his defense extremely terrifying. Even the first attack of the second reincarnation behemoth did not hurt Kong Shinmu at all. This was mainly because Kong Shinmu had just devoured 2 reincarnation behemoths, and the attribute of the reincarnation behemoth's power was the same. After Kong Shinmu devoured the power of 2 reincarnation behemoths, his resistance to the reincarnation behemoth's attack had increased by several times. This was the strength of the devouring power. The reincarnation behemoth's attack did not kill Kong Shinmu, but the raging flames in the field became even more intense. This scene made the dragon martialists outside the Rising Dragon Square extremely nervous. Everyone was shocked by this scene, and they did not dare to underestimate Kong Shinmu anymore. It was as if all the mockery they had for him previously had vanished into thin air, as if it had never appeared. Too powerful. This fellow. No wonder Xiao Bai said that this young man's talent surpassed all the young talents in the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice City. The stronger ones were yet to come. Kong Shinmu did not even use the power of the dragon weapon. The reincarnation behemoth became stronger and stronger, but Kong Shinmu's resistance to its power also became stronger as he continued to devour it. Therefore, the reincarnation behemoth could not hurt Kong Shinmu at all. In fact, after 15 minutes, Kong Shinmu devoured enough of the reincarnation behemoth's raging flame power. In the next moment, the raging flame power erupted in the form of the 9 Extreme Dao Roaring Dragon Explosion. The raging flame power had already been transformed into the purest devouring power, so much so that Kong Shinmu's body could no longer contain it. His devouring space was already filled with this power. At this moment, this power completely erupted and condensed into 3 extremely terrifying black dragon breaths. In an instant, they bombarded the reincarnation behemoth. When the 3 black dragon breaths hit the reincarnation behemoth's body, it actually shattered into pieces and exploded in all directions. In the end, it turned into the purest source of the samsara power and was devoured by Kong Shinmu. He began to condense his samsara power. This scene caused everyone in the surroundings to fall silent when the reincarnation beast exploded into pieces. Previously, they had thought that Kong Shinmu was a fool. But now, who would dare to say that this fellow was a fool? This was too terrifying. He was actually able to resist the attack of the second reincarnation behemoth with his physical body. Moreover, the attacks were getting fiercer and fiercer, yet they were unable to hurt him. What kind of level had this fellow's defense reached? Could a body-tempering dragon technique really be this terrifying? Every one of them was shocked. Even Gu Xinyue was shocked. Stars appeared in the eyes of her 2 female cousins. This Kong Shinmu is so handsome. Even I am starting to admire Kong Shinmu, let alone Xiao Bai. I have never seen anyone kill a second reincarnation behemoth in such a dominating manner. He is too strong. How many levels can he surpass? I don't know. In my opinion, he should be able to fight against a 7th level Dragon Emperor. Perhaps he can even kill a 7th level Dragon Emperor. Wouldn't he be as strong as my cousin then? Gu Xinyue was only at the 9th level Dragon Emperor and was a 5th class disciple of the 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land. Given the combat strength that Kong Shinmu had just displayed, it was very safe for him to become a 3rd class disciple. He might even become a 4th class disciple. Chapter 46-81. Gu Xinyue was also shocked. She had originally come to look at Jiang Xinwu with a lofty attitude. After all, every single level of difference between the disciples of the 5 extreme profound Ice Holy Land was a massive gap. It required a great deal of hard work to break through. Hence, she had thought that Kong Xinmu would at most become a 2nd-grade disciple or a 3rd-grade disciple. There was a huge gap between him and a 5th-grade disciple like her. However, it seemed like the gap between her and Kong Xinmu wasn't that huge. Of course, when she thought about it carefully, she realized that Kong Xinmu wouldn't be able to break through in a short period of time. On the other hand, she had put in a lot of hard work to break through to the level of a super mystical dragon. She had even been preparing to break through recently. Once she broke through, she would basically become a 6th-grade disciple, which would be another grade. It wouldn't be that easy to catch up to. Of course, Gu Xinyue had already developed a lot of interest in Kong Xinmu. This young man definitely wasn't like the rumors made him out to be. Even though Kong Xinmu had created such a huge miracle, he didn't care about the attitude of the people around him. Instead, he focused on absorbing the samsara power and refining his samsara innate ability. At the moment, Kong Xinmu's speed had slowed down. He wasn't in a hurry. What followed was the boring process of consolidating his strength. During this process, the people on the Rising Dragon Plaza wouldn't disturb him, as he had paid for it. He broke through from the 3rd to the 4th and then to the 5th level of the samsara realm. Furthermore, he had defeated the 2nd samsara beast, which was equivalent to him leveling up 3 times. Even though he could only control 50% of his strength each time, it was still enough to make his current strength at least double what it had been before. Of course, he had just broken through and was refining the samsara power, so the speed at which he consolidated his strength was very fast. In the next few days, Kong Xinmu could completely consolidate his strength to 70% to 80%. That way, his combat strength would be much stronger than before. It was no longer a problem for him to kill a mentor like Chou Jingyun. Of course, Kong Xinmu had not met the 7th level of the Dragon Emperor of the Dragon God's Great World, so he did not know how strong they were. But no matter what, Kong Xinmu's goal was to pass the 4th level of the 5 Extreme Profound Ice Holy Tower and become a 4th-class disciple of the 5 Extreme Profound Ice Holy Land. Until the sky gradually darkened. Most of the people in the surroundings had already left. When they left, they were still clicking their tongues in wonder. They believed that Kong Xinmu's deeds would soon spread throughout the entire 5 Extremes mysterious ice city. Because of this, the mockery towards Kong Xinmu would definitely disappear completely. When the sky gradually darkened, Kong Xinmu finally finished condensing the samsara power. Now, all that was left was to consolidate it. He could go back and consolidate it. Therefore, he left the Rising Dragon Square. However, just as he walked out of the Rising Dragon Plaza, he was startled outside the entrance. He saw many dragon martial artists waiting outside, and when they saw him coming out, they all went to welcome him. Young Master Jiang. I'm the daughter of the Shangguan family's patriarch, one of the 7 great families in the city. I wonder if you have the time to have dinner with this little girl? Young Master Jiang, I represent our demon-suppressing divine dragon sect master to extend an invitation to you. Please consider joining our demon-suppressing divine dragon sect. For a moment, countless people in front of Kong Xinmu spoke to him, inviting him to have dinner with them. Among these people, many were representing their family factions, inviting Kong Xinmu to serve them. In order to do so, they could provide sufficient cultivation resources to nurture Kong Xinmu. Of course, this didn't stop Kong Xinmu from joining the 5 Extreme Profound Ice Holy Land. The reason why a holy land was a holy land was because it transcended worldly concerns and stood above all other sects and factions. In principle, a disciple of the 5 Extreme Profound Ice Holy Land could choose to join other sects and factions, and serve those sects and factions. However, the most important thing was to put the interests of the 5 Extreme Profound Ice Holy Land first. Otherwise, they would be expelled from the Holy Land. However, Kong Xinmu didn't have any plans to join any family faction now. He pushed the crowd away with both hands, feeling somewhat puzzled. These people were really too crazy. Was he really such a genius? If he asked this question, everyone present would definitely answer him unanimously. Yes, you are such a genius. The scene of him fighting the 2nd reincarnation beast had made everyone's blood boil. It had been truly satisfying. In front of the 2nd reincarnation beast, Kong Xinmu didn't seem to be at a disadvantage at all. He had practically crushed his opponent in an absolutely dominating manner. There weren't many people in the entire 5 extreme profound ice holy land who could obtain this kind of glory. It was obvious that Kong Shinmu would definitely rise to become an extremely powerful existence in the future. However, Kong Shinmu wasn't interested in these people's recruitment. Thus, he could only reject them as he walked out of the crowd and returned to his inn. Only now did he understand how Xiaobai had felt when she had returned the day before. It was simply torture to have so many people following her. However, they were still very enthusiastic, and there was no way to stop them at all. Many family factions had come to invite Kong Shinmu. Many young misses had also come to invite him to dinner. They wanted to get to know him. If they could catch Kong Shinmu's eye, they might be able to obtain a great genius for their family. These families, sects, and factions all competed with each other for benefits. One had to know that the chaotic battlefield was the best place to get rich. However, in the chaotic battlefield, it wasn't that the higher one's cultivation or the higher the grade of the inheritance, the easier it was to obtain good things. The most important thing was to have the ability to crush those of the same cultivation level. This was because many ruins had restrictions on the grades of the inheritances of the major races. For example, many ruins had restrictions. Only those below the 5th level of the Emperor tier could enter. Kong Shinmu was such a super strong 4th level Dragon Emperor. Just like Susan Luo. Susan Luo was extremely famous in the chaotic battlefield. He had obtained too many precious cultivation resources for the void human race. This was why his status was so transcendent. Right now, Kong Shinmu's cultivation level was only slightly lower. However, he could easily kill the second reincarnation beast. His future was already very promising. Even if Kong Shinmu's compatibility with the divine dragon's blood essence wasn't very high, it didn't matter. He could choose not to break through and directly enter the ruins to explore in the chaotic battlefield. He could still obtain unimaginable wealth. Perhaps Kong Shinmu could even become the next Susan Luo. Many people thought to themselves. Chapter 4682. When Kong Shinmu returned to the inn, there was a group of people following behind him. However, he didn't want to bother with these people. After all, he knew that these people only recruited him because they valued the benefits he could bring. Therefore, Kong Shinmu wasn't like Xiaobai yesterday. He didn't even say a word and went straight into the inn. These people naturally couldn't follow him in. Kong Shinmu went straight back to his courtyard. The courtyard was protected by an array formation. These people couldn't barge in, right? However, when Kong Shinmu returned to the courtyard, he realized that there were 2 people in the courtyard. One of them was Xiaobai, and the other was also a beauty. Furthermore, she was a very strong beauty. The 2 women were drinking tea in the courtyard. It seemed like they were waiting for Kong Shinmu to return. When Kong Shinmu returned, the 2 women's eyes lit up. "Hello, Kong Shinmu." The unfamiliar beauty smiled sweetly and bowed slightly. "I'm Gu Xinyue from the Gu family in the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice City." "Oh, hello." Kong Shinmu nodded without any special expression. He had no idea about the families in the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice City and had never heard of Gu Xinyue. Therefore, he naturally didn't have any reaction. However, Xiaobai covered her mouth and chuckled. War Moon is in the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. She's about to break through to become a 6th-class disciple. When she breaks through to the super mystical dragon, it won't be a problem. Oh! When Kong Shinmu heard this, he was a little surprised. He thought that Gu Xinyue was very young. He didn't expect that she was already about to break through to the super mystical dragon. He couldn't help but think of the little princess from the demon god race, Xueqi. The cultivation resources that Xueqi received were definitely the best in the world. However, the grade of her inherited blood essence was only equivalent to that of the Dragon King when she was with Kong Shinmu. However, Xueqi was definitely younger than Gu Xinyue. Although Gu Xinyue looked young, she was actually much older than Kong Shinmu. I'm afraid he's close to 30 years old. Of course, to be able to become a super divine dragon at such a young age was already considered a super genius. Even in the entire 5 Extremes Dark Ice Holy Lands, there would be a place for her. Why would such a person come looking for them? Kong Shinmu was puzzled. Were they here to recruit them as well? Unfortunately, Kong Shinmu had no interest in joining these forces. Gu Xinyue seemed to have seen through Kong Shinmu's doubts. She chuckled and said, I didn't come here to ask you to join the Gu family and work for the Gu family. I just wanted to tell you a piece of news. Our Gu family discovered a supreme relic in the Chaos battlefield. The restrictions on this supreme relic only allow dragon martial artists below the 5th level of the martial emperor level to enter. Of course, there will be competitors from other races. However, I believe that if the two of you work together to enter the supreme relic, you will definitely gain a lot, right? With your strength, it won't be a problem to deal with ordinary 4th level martial emperors. Therefore, if the two of you are willing, you can make a trip there after joining the 5 Extremes Dark Ice Holy Lands. This time, our Gu family will only take 10% of the profits. What do you think? This piece of news was very important to Kong Shin-mu. After coming to the Dragon God's great world, how could he quickly improve? Cultivate in the 5 Extremes Dark Ice Holy Lands? Although the dragon mark here was rich in energy, in terms of speed of improvement, it was definitely not as fast as exploring the Supreme Relic. Moreover, Kong Shin-mu was extremely tempted by the Supreme Relic. This was because if he swallowed the remains of a Supreme Expert in the Supreme Relic, it would greatly improve the grade of his blood essence inheritance. Previously, when he swallowed the remains of a Supreme Myriad Tribulation Ghost Fire Demon God, his blood essence inheritance of the Demon God race had increased by several levels. What kind of terrifying speed was this? Therefore, to Kong Shin-mu, the fastest way was to go to the Supreme Relic. Of course, he couldn't show this. Under normal circumstances, if one just joined the 5 Extremes Dark Ice Holy Lands, they would definitely cultivate in seclusion. If they could break through to the 5th level of the Dragon Emperor, then Kong Shin-mu's strength would increase greatly. And at this time, Gu Xinyue came to find Kong Shin-mu and the others, obviously hoping that they would go to the Supreme Relic to explore when they were at the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor. She couldn't go herself, and the Gu clan didn't have any suitable candidates either. Rather than helplessly watch as the Supreme Ruins were explored by others, it was better to recruit 2 experts and bring some of their outstanding young talents to give it a try. Without Kong Shin-mu and Xiao Bai, the Gu family definitely didn't plan to enter the Supreme Relic. This was because the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor martial artists of the Gu clan were not very strong. There were 2 men and 2 women in the direct line of descent, and their cultivation had reached the 7th level of the Rebirth Tribulation realm. However, in terms of the cultivation of the dragon martial technique and the mastery of the dragon weapon, they could not compare to the true experts. Their strength could only be said to be average. If they entered the Supreme Relic casually, it was very likely that they wouldn't be able to come out. However, with Kong Shin-mu and Xiao Bai leading the way, it would be different. Gu Xinyue had absolute trust in Kong Shin-mu and Xiao Bai's strength. In the Supreme Relic, not only could Kong Shin-mu and Xiao Bai be invincible, it would also be very easy for them to protect the young people of the Gu family. The only possible danger would come from the Supreme Relic itself. As for the competitors of other races, they didn't need to worry too much. Unless an existence on the level of Susan Luo appeared. However, not every race had an expert on the level of Susan Luo. Therefore, Gu Xinyue had taken a fancy to Kong Shin-mu and Xiao Bai. Since that's the case, we'll discuss this matter after the Sacred Tower of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice is opened. Right now, we have to focus on clearing the Sacred Tower. Kong Shin-mu said after thinking for a while. That's what I should do. Warm Moon wishes the two of you victory in advance and clearing the higher levels of the Sacred Tower. Gu Xinyue said with a sweet smile. Thank you. Kong Shin-mu cupped his hands together. In that case, Warm Moon will leave first. See you at the sacred ground in 3 days. Gu Xinyue bowed slightly and left the courtyard. She was very polite to Kong Shin-mu. Although she was a powerful existence on the 9th level of the Dragon Emperor, she didn't put on any airs. She wasn't like the envoys sent by the other families who were all arrogant. Gu Xinyue was a strong woman. The grade of her divine dragon blood essence inheritance was the same as Ling Hu Dai Er's. Moreover, the two of them would soon break through to the super divine dragon level. In comparison, Ling Hu Dai was a dragon martial artist of the dragon martial continent. Her cultivation resources were inferior to those of Gu Xinyue. Therefore, Ling Hu Dai's talent was definitely better than Gu Xinyue's. As for their innate blood essence compatibility, Kong Shin-mu didn't look at it. If he could see it himself, he would definitely look at each person's compatibility. However, only the Black Dragon's consciousness could see it. Chapter 4683. After Gu Xinyue left, Xiaobai smiled and asked, "The situation is not bad. Even Gu Xinyue was attracted. I heard the news yesterday that this Gu Xinyue might become a 6th-class disciple when the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Tower opens." This also meant that Gu Xinyue's strength had already reached the level of a Super Shenlong. Would she break through to Super Shenlong and challenge the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Tower? The 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Tower opened once a year for half a month each time. During this half a month, one could challenge the Holy Tower at any time. For Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai, of course they could wait until their strength had more or less stabilized after breaking through. But for Gu Xinyue, she might need to cultivate for a period of time. She should have reached a small bottleneck, otherwise she wouldn't be wandering around outside. This kind of small bottleneck wasn't a real bottleneck. She just needed a little rest and then she could break through in one go. Kong Xinmu nodded and said, "The Supreme Relic is a very good place for us to train. Fighting with the experts of other races in the Supreme Relic is very helpful for raising our battle strength. It's mainly in terms of battle reaction in different environments. This is very important." Xiaobai also agreed. "Then after we become disciples of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Tower, we will directly go to the Supreme Relic?" The opening of the Supreme Relic seems to have a time limit. So after we pass the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Tower, we will go to the Gu family to ask about the situation. Kong Xinmu said. He was rather looking forward to the Supreme Relic. Even if the Supreme Relic didn't belong to the Dragon God race, the Demon God race, or the Void Human race, it was still very useful to him. Because other than the power of inheritance, the major races actually had something in common. The attribute of each power was one of the most basic attributes. So by devouring the corpses of the supreme experts of other races, Kong Xinmu would definitely be able to improve. At most, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth would quickly overflow, and he would be able to quickly increase his cultivation level. There was nothing more to say after that. The two of them began to go into seclusion to consolidate their recently increased strength. Among them, Xiaobai had reached the 5th level of the Reincarnation Tribulation Realm. She had directly condensed the innate power of reincarnation. When she used various ice-attribute dragon martial techniques, their power had at least doubled. This was already a terrifying increase. Furthermore, after her return, she had used the rich dragon mark energy in the underground training ground of the inn to break through to the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor's divine dragon blood essence. This allowed the destructive power of her reincarnation power to increase explosively once again. It was just that she hadn't consolidated her power yet, so she could only unleash half of it at most. In a short period of time, she would not be able to completely consolidate these powers. They had to challenge the sacred pagoda of Pentapex's profound ice within 7 days at most. In any case, the fastest way to consolidate their strength was within 7 days. In 7 days, the two of them should be able to consolidate their strength to about 70 to 80%. There was still 20 to 30% left. Even if he couldn't consolidate it, the impact wouldn't be too great. He could continue to consolidate it later. After entering the sacred pagoda of Pentapex's profound ice, the cultivation environment was much better. The dragon mark energy and the spirit chi of heaven and earth were much more abundant. Although it was easy for them to raise their cultivation level now, after reaching the 5th level of the Reincarnation Tribulation Realm, they needed to spend a lot of time and absorb a lot of spirit chi of heaven and earth to raise their cultivation level. Furthermore, the higher their cultivation level, the more difficult it would be to consolidate their strength, and the more time it would take. Which of the peak 9th level of the Reincarnation Tribulation Realm hadn't cultivated for decades? It definitely wouldn't be easy for Kong Xinmu and the rest to catch up to this gap. Of course, Kong Xinmu didn't need to catch up to those fellows. He only needed to raise his cultivation level by 2 more levels. If he could kill a second reincarnation beast every time, he would be equivalent to a 9th level of the Reincarnation Tribulation Realm. After all, as long as he could kill a second reincarnation beast every time he broke through, he would be able to condense 1 more reincarnation power. This was equivalent to raising his cultivation level by 1 more level. It was precisely because of this that all the dragon martial artists were so passionate about it. Unfortunately, there were very few dragon martial artists who could do it. Even among the disciples of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land, only 10% of the geniuses could do it. As for those who could kill a reincarnation beast every time they raised their cultivation level, they were even rarer. Some geniuses even regretted not being able to kill a second reincarnation beast. This was because they were too harsh on themselves, and at the same time they had some obsessive-compulsive disorder. It was easier for Xiao Bai to encounter such a situation. However, Kong Xinmu shouldn't miss out on this. No matter what, as long as Xiao Bai cultivated the high-grade divine spirit dragon martial technique, there would be more hope. In the next 7 days, Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai continuously consolidated their cultivation level, increasing their strength even more. Compared to when they had just broken through, their strength had increased by more than 20%. It was about time for them to make a move. At this time, the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy tower had already been opened for 3 days. They had paid an additional 3 days' worth of gold dragon coins to the innkeeper, which allowed them to stay for 3 more days. Then, they held hands and headed to the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy land. The 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy land was 600 miles away from the 5 Extremes mysterious ice city. For a dragon martial artist at the level of the Dragon Emperor, this distance could be reached in a little over 2 hours. Moreover, for Kong Xinmu, there was no need for him to fly like this. After he had ascertained the location of the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy land, he immediately used the wind shadow flowing cloud flash with Xiao Bai. Because he had devoured the comprehension of the supreme sage realm, this dragon martial technique could not only be used continuously, but it also consumed very little energy. Moreover, it could allow him to travel very far. The distance of 600 miles was practically crossed in the blink of an eye. Of course, it was impossible for Kong Xinmu to take out the instant magic ring now. This was because he had left the black concealing dragonstone with Xiao Yuhua and the others to ensure their safety. Therefore, if the current Kong Xinmu used the instant magic ring, it would be very difficult to eliminate the demonic aura. If that happened, it would very likely attract a great deal of trouble. In any case, Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai quickly arrived at the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy land. This was a city covered in ice and snow. Amidst the ice and snow, there were countless tower-like buildings that towered into the clouds. They were beautiful and magnificent, as if they were directly connected to the peak of the sky. This was the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy land. These white tower-like buildings were where the disciples of the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy land cultivated and lived. Behind the white tower-like buildings, there were many more magnificent buildings that were hidden in the clouds, faintly discernible. Chapter 46-84. When he arrived at the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy land, Kong Xinmu discovered that there were dragon martialists everywhere. Divine dragons of various attributes that filled the sky constantly appeared in front of him and Xiao Bai. The divine dragons that these dragon martialists transformed into were all extremely powerful existences. At the very least, they were at the level of the Dragon Emperor's divine dragon inheritance blood essence. As for their cultivation realm, it was related to their age. Some of the older ones were at the peak of the 9th level of the rebirth tribulation realm, but some of the younger dragon martialists were more talented and had reached a higher level of divine dragon inheritance blood essence earlier. These young dragon martialists were at every level of the rebirth tribulation realm, but none had yet to reach the rebirth tribulation realm. Presumably, it was difficult for dragon martialists who had yet to reach the rebirth tribulation realm to break through to the Dragon Emperor's level. Kong Xinmu was already at his limit, let alone the others. Of course, the higher the cultivation realm of the dragon martialist, the greater the advantage of challenging the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy tower. This was very obvious. However, there was an age limit for the disciples of the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy land. They had to be below 30 years old when they first joined. Therefore, those who wanted to wait until the peak of the 9th level of the rebirth tribulation realm to join the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy land were basically useless. Moreover, even if they had already become a disciple of the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy land, they would still lose points due to their age when challenging the sacred tower. The older they were, the more serious the loss of points. Generally speaking, the full score for a certain level of the sacred tower was 100 points. As long as they reached 60 points, they would be considered to have passed and obtain the corresponding level of disciple title. And the older they were, the points they would receive would decrease. It was possible that older dragon martialists would need 70 to 80 points to be considered to have passed, so this was also relatively fair. Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai flew over and discovered that the 5 Extremes mysterious ice holy land was already very lively. The entire Frost Ice Holy Land was filled with dragon martialists, some of them in groups of 2s and 3s. They landed at the main entrance of the Five Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land and saw two powerful guards with the aura of a super divine dragon. The two guards were meticulously inspecting the people who passed by. After Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai went over and reported their identities, they were let in. Basically, it wasn't difficult to enter the Five Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land. Of course, this was only possible during the half a month that the Five Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Tower opened. Other than that, one could only enter the Five Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land through special channels, such as being invited or being captured as a criminal. Within this half a month, the Five Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Pagoda would open. As long as one wasn't a wanted dragon martial artist, they would basically be allowed to enter the Holy Land. Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai walked towards the Five Extremes Dark Ice Holy Land together. As they walked through the ice pavilions that looked like white jade, they felt like they were in a fairyland. The surrounding heaven and earth spirit chi was extremely dense. If one were to talk about the density of the Dragon Mark's energy, just in the outer region of the Holy Land of Five Extremes mysterious ice, the density of the Dragon Mark's energy was more than 10 times that of the Heaven's Core region in the Martial Dragon continent. It could be seen that in the inner region and the core region, the density of the Dragon Mark's energy was even more terrifying. As for the specific density of the Dragon Mark's energy, Kong Xinmu didn't know. He hadn't seen it yet. They kept moving forward, heading towards the Five Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Pagoda. Along the way, they heard many dragon martial artists who came to participate in the test of the Five Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Pagoda sighing. Some of them had returned from the chaotic battlefield. They knew that the overall situation of the dragon gods was not very good recently, and they were quite worried about the country and its people. And some people had simply returned from the main battlefield of the dragon gods' great world. The so-called main battlefield of the dragon gods' great world was a matter where a total of 4 races joined forces to attack the dragon gods. Now, many supreme divine dragons in the Holy Land had gone to resist the alliance of the 4 races. Only a few supreme divine dragons would stay in the Holy Land to guard it. It was also an extremely important matter, and they couldn't leave at will. It could be said that the supreme divine dragons in the dragon god's great world were in a very tense state. Otherwise, Emperor Shi Divine Dragon and the Dragon of Calamity wouldn't have left the dragon martial continent alone. They really had no choice. The 4 races joined forces to attack several places in the dragon god's great world. 2 of them were 2 holy lands. Now, many supreme divine dragons had gone to help guard them. There were probably more than 100 supreme divine dragons gathered in each holy land. There was another place that was a forbidden land. That forbidden land could be said to be an important place in the dragon god's great world. It was the place where the ancestor dragon died a long time ago. That place was extremely sacred, and it was the place where supreme divine dragons advanced and cultivated. That place was also attacked, and it was also a very important place. At least 100 supreme divine dragons were sent to guard it. It should be known that the races that attacked that place were extremely powerful, and they had sent too many people. This time, the 4 races were determined to peel off a layer of skin from the dragon god's great world. They wanted to reap even more benefits. As for the supreme divine dragons of the remaining race, they were basically wandering on the dragon martial continent, trying to find a gap to attack the hinterland of the dragon god's great world. Unfortunately. In addition, there were also hundreds of supreme divine dragons searching and patrolling the border of the dragon god's great world. They formed an extremely vast defensive barrier. Although it couldn't completely stop the opponent from entering the dragon god's great world, they could clearly sense that once someone broke through the barrier, they would immediately find out and send people to surround them. It was said that there were already 3 supreme divine dragons who had invaded the dragon god's great world. One of them was wantonly killing dragon warriors. Unfortunately, he was quickly caught and brutally killed on the spot. There were still 2 who had not made any movements, but the dragon god's great world cultivators couldn't find them. Now, these 2 invading supreme divine dragons could be said to be a hidden danger to the dragon god's great world. All the important places in the dragon god's great world were guarded by supreme divine dragons, and they would not slack off in the slightest. However, because there weren't enough supreme divine dragons, a place like the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land only had 1 supreme dragon martialist guarding it. It should be known that under normal circumstances, there would be at least 2 supreme divine dragon warriors stationed there. The current situation was tense, and they could feel it a little when they were in the 5 Extremes Dark Ice City. However, the atmosphere in the city was quite peaceful. After all, the 5 Extremes Dark Ice Holy Land was still far from the border of the Dragon God's great world. However, now the Holy Tower of the 5 Extremes Dark Ice Holy Land was opened. Many senior divine dragon warriors, who were training outside and fighting against the alien races, had returned. They wanted to break through the higher levels of the Holy Tower so that their cultivation could go to a higher level. Therefore, many of them were divine dragon warriors who had returned from the war outside. The whole atmosphere was quite tense and intense. Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai were also somewhat affected. They could clearly feel that the current crisis of the Dragon God's great world made many powerful divine dragon warriors somewhat pessimistic. Chapter 4685. Of course, people at the level of Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai could not do anything about such a big matter. It was not that Kong Xinmu felt that it was none of his business, but he felt that he could not help much. Even if he went to the battlefield and faced the enemy powerhouses, he would not be able to do anything. He might as well improve himself as quickly as possible. Only by becoming stronger could he be of any use to the situation. Moreover, Kong Xinmu did not have a strong sense of belonging to the Dragon God's great world. Admittedly, he had started by cultivating the divine dragon's inheritance, but now he also cultivated the inheritance of the demon god race and the inheritance of the void human race's power of void. The Dragon God's great world had previously allowed the Dragon Martial continent to be fought over and enslaved by the 9 races. This matter still made Kong Xinmu feel very uncomfortable. Of course, no matter what, he was still a member of the Dragon Gods. If it really came to a time when he needed to fight, he would not hesitate. Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai walked together in the holy lands of 5 Extremes mysterious ice toward the sacred tower. Along the way, they saw many people discussing the situation of the challenge. The sacred tower had a total of 9 levels. The number of levels one could pass determined the class of disciple. Moreover, because there were many people challenging the levels every year, it was impossible to let people start from the first level. Every time, they would directly decide on a level and challenge it themselves. If they passed, they would directly become a first-class disciple. If they did not pass, they would fail. For the disciples of the Holy Lands of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice, challenging the levels was also a way to improve. Similarly, they only had one chance to choose a level every year. For these disciples, their improvement was basically smooth. They only had to challenge a higher level every year. But for the newcomers who wanted to become a disciple of the Holy Lands of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice, for example, Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai, the level they chose was very important. Kong Xinmu planned to challenge the 4th level directly, while Xiao Bai was preparing to challenge the 3rd level. With their current combat strength, it should not be too much of a problem. Of course, accidents could happen at any time, so even if the two of them weren't very confident, their chances of success were already very high. Kong Xinmu had to become a 4th-class disciple. Otherwise, Xiao Bai might be bullied by others. This was something Kong Xinmu didn't want to see. As for Xiao Bai, she could definitely pass the 2nd level with her strength, and she had an 80% chance of passing the 3rd level. She was already very strong, but it was said that passing the sanctum still depended on some luck. It was not a matter of strength. This also had to do with improvisation. Soon, they continued to move forward in the 5 Extremes Dark Ice Holy Land, following the people coming and going, and arriving in front of an ice tower that towered into the clouds. The entire sacred tower was extremely tall and wide, occupying a vast area. Tens of thousands of people surrounded the sacred tower, observing the situation above, but it didn't seem crowded at all. There were more than 1,000 rooms on the same floor of the 5 Extreme Profound Ice Pagoda. Even if thousands of dragon martial artists came at the same time, they would be able to break through at the same time. Therefore, the area it occupied was definitely not small. The tens of thousands of people outside were either queuing up for the challenge, or they had already completed the challenge and were outside discussing, waiting for people, and the like. When Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai arrived, they saw that there were many people wearing the 5 Extreme Profound Ice Holy Land Disciple uniforms around the sacred tower, guarding the entire sacred tower. There were a total of 8 directions, and each one was guarded by a super divine dragon expert. Moreover, these experts were all super strong existences at super divine dragon level 7 and above. Each of them had the strength to take charge of an area. With them guarding outside, no one dared to cause trouble at this time. As for the order of clearing the levels, there was a man and a woman in each direction, and 2 7th-class disciples were in charge. There were quite a number of 7th-class disciples, but there were fewer 8th-class and 9th-class disciples. Every year when the Sacred Tower opened, 16 7th-class disciples were arranged to be in charge of clearing the Sacred Tower. When Kong Xinmu and Xiaobai arrived, they immediately queued up at the same place. After queuing for a full 2 hours, it was finally their turn to register. After registering, they had to wait. This was because everyone took a longer time to clear the levels, and it wasn't something that could be settled in a short period of time. Therefore, they probably had to wait for about 6 hours before the 3rd and 4th levels of the Sacred Tower would be empty. When they found out that it was Kong Xinmu and Xiaobai's first time challenging the Sacred Tower, the 2 7th-class disciples looked at them strangely, most likely thinking that these 2 rascals were a little too arrogant. After all, very few people could challenge the 3rd level the moment they came up, and even fewer people would challenge the 4th level. Of course, the number of people challenging the 4th level of the Sacred Tower was much fewer than the 3rd level. However, because the total number of checkpoints on the 4th level was also fewer, and the number of people challenging at the same time was only 30% of the number of people on the 3rd level, Kong Xinmu's wait time was no less than Xiaobai's. After registering, they waited outside, and at the same time, paid attention to the surrounding news. Now that Kong Xinmu had fused with the perception of the nightmare beast, he could clearly hear the contents of many people's conversations around him. As for the content of the Sacred Tower Challenge, Kong Xinmu had a rough understanding of it. There were a few methods in total, and among them, the most common was a one-on-one battle. You would be given an opponent to fight with, and if you could defeat them within the specified time, you would pass. Points would be calculated according to the time you defeated the opponent. You would only pass if you scored 60 points. Of course, the age bonus was also deducted. As for Kong Xinmu and Xiaobai, they weren't even 30 years old, so they wouldn't have too much of a disadvantage because of their age. However, there were no additional benefits to challenging the levels at such a young age. Apart from this method, there was also a method that required the challenger to hit some fast-moving targets. There would be a total of 100 targets, and each level's speed would be different. Some would even use the power of the void to distort space, and then travel through it. There were many other methods. 4 dragon warriors who weren't 30 years old, as long as they could hit more than 60 targets, they would pass. There was also a test of speed. One had to avoid all the traps in a short period of time and successfully reach the destination. In this method, the shorter the time taken to reach the destination and the more traps they avoided, the higher the points. There were many forms in the Sacred Tower, but there were basically no real battles between dragon warriors. Dragon warriors had to face things like traps. It was said that there would only be battles between dragon warriors at the 7th level and above. This was because the traps on the 7th level and above were extremely difficult to make. Even if they were made, it would be very difficult to repair once they were damaged. As time passed, the 7th level of the Sacred Tower would be a face-to-face test for dragon warriors. As for Kong Xinmu and Xiaobai, they had to pass the 3rd and 4th levels, so they naturally had to face some of the traps. It wasn't difficult, but it definitely wasn't easy either. Chapter 4686. It was normal and understandable to be depressed. As for crying out loud, it was probably because they were already 30 years old. If they did not pass this year, they would have to go through the Holy Tower again next year, and the requirements would be higher. Thus, their hopes would become even slimmer. The 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land was not a place that just anyone could enter. In fact, if it was a dragon martial artist below the 5th level of the Dragon Emperor, even if they passed the Holy Tower, there would still be another round, which was to test the compatibility of the dragon martial artist's divine dragon blood essence. This was a very important thing. Some dragon martial artists had amazing talent and terrifying combat strength before reaching the 5th layer of the Dragon Emperor realm. However, their compatibility did not reach 55, so it would be very difficult for them to even reach the 5th level of the Dragon Emperor. Even if they reached it, they would have used up even more cultivation resources. For the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land, such people were not qualified to become disciples of the Holy Land. One had to know that the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land was not a regular sect or organization. Every Holy Land was doing its best for the reproduction and development of the dragon gods. Thus, the limited cultivation resources had to be shared equally with more outstanding geniuses with higher compatibility. Not those fake geniuses who had reached a bottleneck early on. As for the real geniuses, those with extremely high compatibility and comprehension of dragon martial techniques and weapons, if their bloodline compatibility was not high, they would be sent to the corresponding Holy Land to cultivate and improve their bloodline compatibility. This was the only way, and it was also the way to raise them to a higher level with fewer cultivation resources. Of course, this method might not necessarily save time. After all, cultivating in the corresponding Holy Land to improve bloodline compatibility was not an easy and simple matter. Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai waited at the side. Looking at the Holy Tower, they could feel the grandeur of the Holy Tower. Even the 4 dragon martial academies of the dragon martial continent could not compare to the grandeur of this Holy Tower, not to mention the entire 5 extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land. When can I have Xueqi come over to cultivate and improve her bloodline compatibility? Unfortunately, to come to the Dragon God world from the Dragon Martial continent, one needs at least the cultivation of the 5th level of the Dragon Emperor. She seems to be a little far from this level. Kong Xinmu thought. Suddenly, a group of people escorted a middle-aged man dressed in luxurious purple robes to the sacred tower. The middle-aged man in luxurious purple robes had the 5-edged ice crystal pattern of the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land embroidered on his sleeves. He was clearly an expert of the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land. 8th grade disciple. Kong Xinmu saw through the middle-aged man's rank with just a glance. An 8th class disciple had at least a 7th level super divine dragon blood essence. In the entire 5 extremes dark ice Holy Land, there weren't many such characters. Previously, Wenren was already very strong, but she was only a 7th grade disciple. This middle-aged man was even stronger, and the dragon warriors surrounding him were all at least 6th rank disciples. Including the middle-aged man, there were a total of 7 people. In other words, all 7 of them were at the level of Super Shenron. Some of them were injured and looked extremely heroic. They were in a hurry, as if they had just returned from the front lines. The middle-aged man in the lead walked forward. He didn't pay much attention to the many 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land disciples guarding the sacred tower. He walked past them and entered the sacred tower. Senior Yu Xiaoyao is going to challenge the 9th level. I can tell. Senior brother Yu Xiaoyao had a breakthrough during the training in the battlefield and reached Super Dragon God level 9. He's too strong. After a while, won't he reach the level of Supreme Divine Dragon? If he reaches the Supreme Divine Dragon level, our 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land will be even stronger. And our dragon gods will be even stronger. Countless people were discussing and whispering to each other. To them, Yu Xiaoyao was like a legend. Although he was not young anymore, many people in the 9th level of the super mystical dragon realm were already old men. Yu Xiaoyao was still so young. Clearly, he had a bright future ahead of him. In the next few decades, he might even become an expert among the Supreme Divine Dragons. Although they were all Supreme Divine Dragon blood, there was still a huge gap between them. For example, the difference between the 1st level of Super Divine Dragon and the 9th level of Super Divine Dragon was huge. There was also such a gap between Supreme Divine Dragon levels. Therefore, those old men at the 9th level of Super Divine Dragon had no chance of becoming top-notch experts in the future. But Yu Xiaoyao had a chance. Yu Xiaoyao could be said to be the expert in the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land, who was most likely to step into the Supreme Divine Dragon level in recent years. Of course, the other one was Yu Yaji. Yu Yaji's talent was equally terrifying. She had been an 8th grade disciple for a long time, but had not returned for many years. Originally, she was also very famous. Unfortunately, she had been leading Emperor Shi's Dragon Martial Academy in the Dragon Martial continent. In the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land, many disciples who had just joined did not know Yu Yaji's name. Yu Xiaoyao, on the other hand, was like the sun in the sky. Especially before the war between the 4 clans against the Dragon God's world, he was already a very popular disciple leader. He led the team to attack the various relics in the chaotic battlefield and brought back countless treasures for the Dragon God's clan. Those treasures might not be useful to him, so he donated them all to the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land. In return, the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land gave him enough contribution points to exchange for things that were useful to him. Every year, Yu Xiaoyao's team brought back the best and the most valuable things from the Supreme Relic. After the war started, the 4 clans and the Dragon God's clan rarely sent their mid-level and high-level experts to the chaotic battlefield. Basically, The mid-level and high-level experts were concentrated in the Dragon God's world to participate in the war. As for the supreme relic on the chaotic battlefield, the only ones that the Dragon God's clan and the 4 clans still participated in were the supreme relic with lower restrictions. For example, only those below the 5th level of the Dragon Emperor could enter, those below the Super Divine Dragon level could enter, and so on. The reason why they still wanted to explore the supreme relic was that there might be some extraordinary treasures in the supreme relic. Once they got them, it would be a great improvement for the entire Dragon God's clan. If some relic of the ancient Dragon God was unearthed, the overall strength of the Dragon God's clan would even skyrocket. Therefore, the supreme relic could not be given up, but the mid-level and high-level experts could only come back. For Kong Shin-mu, his role in the main battlefield was too small. It was better to explore the supreme relic. If he could gain something, it would be a contribution to the Dragon God's clan. Of course, it was very difficult to gain something. It was even more difficult to get a divine item that was useful to the Dragon God's clan. Chapter 46-87. Yu Xiaoyao quickly entered the sacred tower. He flew to the sky, wanting to enter the 9th level of the sacred tower. It was already at the top of the clouds, the highest place in the entire sacred tower. To become a grade 9 disciple, one only needed to obtain 60 points on the 9th level. In the sacred tower above the 7th level, there was no such thing as deducting points because of age. Generally speaking, dragon martial artists who could reach this level were already at the peak of the 9th level of the reincarnation realm. Hence, the age restriction was meaningless. Achieving 60 points would be considered a pass. And if one could reach 90 points and above on the 9th level, he would be qualified to be a junior elder in the Holy Land of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice. Now, the Holy Land of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice had a total of 5 junior elders. Each of them was much stronger than Yu Xiaoyao. Among them, there were supreme divine dragons, but most of them were at the peak of the 9th level of the Super Divine Dragon. They had not broken through to the Supreme Divine Dragon level, but they had already reached the peak of the Super Divine Dragon level. Whether it was dragon martial techniques or dragon weapons, they had already reached the peak that could be improved. It could be said that they were the strongest below the Supreme Divine Dragon level. Yu Xiaoyao quickly disappeared. Kong Shin-mu and Xiao Bai did not act rashly. In any case, they just had to wait. Not long after, the sky gradually darkened. Soon, the surrounding people began to talk about Yu Xiaoyao. It was said that Yu Xiaoyao had successfully passed the 9th level of the Sacred Tower and became one of the few grade 9 disciples in the Holy Land of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice. With this status, he could practically do whatever he wanted in the entire Dragon God's great world. Even the junior elders of other sacred grounds would give him enough respect. In fact, as long as one reached the upper 3 grades, it was quite good. In the entire Dragon God's great world, one would be considered famous. In any sacred ground, the number of grade 6 disciples could be said to be almost 10 times that of grade 7 disciples. And the number of grade 7 disciples was 3 times that of grade 8 disciples, and grade 8 disciples were 3 times that of grade 9 disciples. Hence, grade 6 disciples were nothing. Only when one reached grade 7 disciples could he be considered qualified to be independent. For a genius like Gu Xinyue, although she was very talented and had a high degree of compatibility, she was still a grade 5 disciple. She could only be treated as a junior outside. Only by reaching one Renyu's level could he be respected by others. Currently, Kong Shin-mu could only challenge 4th grade disciples. Even if it was a 4th grade disciple, he might not be able to pass. Therefore, he still had a long way to go before he could become a true expert. Look, that's Yu Xiaoyao's son, Yu Zhanfeng. He's not even 30 this year, but he's already passed the 5th level of the Saint Tower and became a 5th class disciple. Furthermore, Yu Zhanfeng is only at the 8th level of the Dragon Emperor's Divine Dragon Inheritance Blood. With the grade of the 8th level of the Dragon Emperor's Blood, passing through the 5th level of the Holy Tower means that he has a very strong ability to challenge those of a higher level. Yu Zhanfeng can be considered an outstanding talent among the younger generation of the 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land. However, I heard that there should be another 2 geniuses appearing this time around. They're both in their early 20s, but they should be able to pass the 3rd and 4th level of the Holy Tower. Oh? Which 2? Recently, 2 geniuses from the Martial Dragon continent appeared in the 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice City. It said that they broke through to the 5th level of the Reincarnation Tribulation Realm on the spot, and killed the second reincarnation beast. There were many people saying this in the crowd. In fact, Kong Xinmu realized that many people were already paying attention to him and Xiao Bai. It wasn't just because they were geniuses. Most importantly, it was because they came from the Martial Dragon continent. For a long time, the Martial Dragon continent would only produce a super divine dragon every 5 or 6 years, and an ordinary super divine dragon would only be a 6th grade disciple in the Five Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land. One could imagine how insignificant the Martial Dragon continent was to the entire Dragon God world. It would probably take decades for a true genius to appear and become a well-known figure in the entire Dragon God's world. For example, Yu Yaji was such a genius. When she rose from the Martial Dragon continent, she was really unstoppable. Many geniuses from the Dragon God's world at the same time were overshadowed by her. Therefore, although the Martial Dragon continent was not valued by others, if a genius appeared in the Martial Dragon continent, it would definitely be valued by the majority. Yu Yaji had only risen not long ago. Therefore, if a super genius appeared in the Martial Dragon continent in a short period of time, then the status of the Martial Dragon continent would indeed change. Kong Xinmu listened to the discussion of the surrounding dragon martial artists. Only then did he understand why killing Susan Lua was valued by the Martial Dragon continent and sent out a supreme divine dragon to protect him. At the very least, it must be a supreme divine dragon that could negotiate with the 9 major races and finally protect the Martial Dragon continent. As for what price the Dragon God's world had paid, no one knew. There were 4 dragon martial academies in the Martial Dragon continent. The dean of each academy was a super divine dragon from the Martial Dragon continent. Therefore, it took a long time for the dean to be replaced. Among the 4 dragon martial academies in the Martial Dragon continent, Emperor Shi Dragon Martial Academy belonged to the Emperor Shi Divine Dragon, Donghuang Yanggu Academy belonged to the Dragon of Blue Sky Calamity, and Desolate North Academy and South Emperor Academy. In total, there were 4 supreme divine dragons, and they all came from different supreme holy lands. Because the Martial Dragon continent seemed to have been conquered by the ancestors of the 4 holy lands, and then the 4 dragon martial academies were established on it. Emperor Shi Divine Dragon and the Dragon of Blue Sky Calamity were 2 of the founders of the 4 academies. Later, the genius dragon martial artists from the 4 academies were basically under their command. In addition to the Martial Dragon continent, there were other similar small worlds. As long as they were under the jurisdiction of the dragon gods, the basic situation was similar. As for those that were under the jurisdiction of other races, the situation was naturally different. But the difference was only the type of inheritance they cultivated. In essence, there was not much difference. Kong Xinmu listened to the surrounding people talking about him and Xiao Bai, but he did not say anything. Anyway, no one knew them. However, he believed that the upper echelons of the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land should be paying more attention to him and Xiao Bai. After all, he and Xiao Bai came from Emperor Shi Dragon Martial Academy. If they really had great talent, then including Yu Yaji, Emperor Shi Dragon Martial Academy had produced many geniuses over the years. In particular, there was one point that the upper echelons of the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land definitely knew. That was, Kong Xinmu was originally a genius of Donghuang Yanggu Academy. In the end, he was forced to leave by their current dean, Zhou Xiaofeng, and that was why he came to Emperor Shi Dragon Martial Academy. This was a genius sent to Emperor Shi Dragon Martial Academy. Chapter 4688. If it was in the past, the seniors of the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land would probably have taken the opportunity to mock the Dragon of Calamity's Holy Land, and then the Dragon of Calamity would punish Zhou Xiaofeng. But now they wouldn't do that. This was because the dragon gods were facing a great enemy, and it was time for them to unite. Even if it was just a competitive joke, it couldn't be done at this time. But if Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai's talent was really that outstanding, then they would definitely be very happy. Everything depended on today's trip to the Holy Tower. Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai were already prepared. When night fell, it was finally their turn to enter the Holy Tower. Let's go! Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai looked at each other and encouraged each other. Actually, Kong Xinmu had set off a little earlier than Xiao Bai, but Xiao Bai was also very fast, so they went together. Under the signal of the Holy Tower's guardian disciple, Kong Xinmu was the first to transform into a pitch-black dragon and fly toward the Holy Tower's 4th level. Even though it was only the 4th level of the Holy Tower, it was already incomparably tall, and even part of it was in the clouds. Those who could pass the fourth level of the Holy Tower were the middle three classes of disciples. This meant that they could touch the clouds, or at least had the qualifications to look at them from afar. As for the lower three classes of disciples, they didn't have such a meaning. Kong Xinmu transformed into a dragon and flew up. He was very conspicuous in the night because his cultivation was clearly only at the fifth level of the Samsara realm, and the divine dragon's inherited blood essence was at the fourth level of the Dragon Emperor. Yet, he was actually flying toward the fourth level of the Holy Tower? Many dragon martial artists focused their gazes on Kong Xinmu, each with a different expression. Most people didn't care. After all, there were such hotheads every year who thought they were very strong, but in the end, they ended up bleeding after entering the Holy Tower. Out of 100 points, 60 points were required to pass. There were even many dragon warriors who couldn't even get 10 points. It could be imagined that such a situation was not uncommon. After a long time, the surrounding dragon warriors no longer found it strange. But at this moment, they saw Kong Xinmu flying towards the fourth level of the Holy Tower. Furthermore, his cultivation realm and the grade of the divine dragon's inheritance blood essence all matched that of the rumored genius from the dragon martial continent. Therefore, many people still paid attention to Kong Xinmu. They all recognized him. Was he the legendary genius from the dragon martial continent? In the crowd, Gu Xinyue's cousin was also watching. I hope this kid fails. If that's the case, this kid will lose a lot of face. Gu Xinyue's cousin knew his place. Ever since he met Xiao Bai by chance, he had fallen in love with her. However, he didn't dare to make a move directly because it was said that Xiao Bai had very high standards. He knew that if you know yourself and your enemy, you can win 100 battles. Therefore, he planned to first understand his competitor, Kong Xinmu, clearly. Only by understanding Kong Xinmu better could he gain an advantageous position in the process of competing for Xiao Bai. Of course, if Kong Xinmu directly passed the fourth level of the Holy Tower tonight and became a fourth-class disciple of the Five Extremes Dark Ice Holy Land, then he knew very well that he could give up on Xiao Bai. He was already over 30 years old this year, but he was still a fourth-class disciple of the Five Extremes Dark Ice Holy Land. One could imagine that his talent was really not that great. If he hadn't been born in the Dragon God's great world, and if he had been born into a big family like the Gu family, he would now be about the same as many dragon warriors from the dragon martial continent. Of course, his compatibility level might not be low, but it was impossible for him to have his current cultivation realm and the grade of the divine dragon's inheritance blood essence. Therefore, his talent was really not that great, and it was even more so in the Dragon God's great world. Therefore, he didn't have much confidence. If Kong Xinmu really passed the fourth level, then he knew that he had almost no chance. He was also only a fourth-class disciple. If Kong Xinmu also became a fourth-class disciple, then he would be on the same level as him. He was much older than Kong Xinmu, and in addition, Xiao Bai and Kong Xinmu had known each other for a long time, so what right did he have to compete for her? Therefore, this cousin was very nervous now. If he knew that the news of Kong Xinmu's failure spread, he would definitely appear in front of Xiao Bai immediately and start wooing her. Inside the Holy Tower, Kong Xinmu flew up to the fourth level of the Holy Tower, removed his divine dragon form, and came in front of the two super divine dragon disciples guarding the door. Super divine dragon level powerhouses basically had more freedom, but many people still rushed to compete for the right to guard the Holy Tower. This was because as long as there were no accidents, the rewards for guarding the Holy Tower would be very generous. The resources obtained by guarding the Holy Tower for half a month were even comparable to the contribution they would earn in a year outside. Therefore, the qualifications to guard the Holy Tower was rotated every year. Only those who reached the level of Super Divine Dragon could have such qualifications. In other words, even Gu Xinyue currently didn't have such qualifications. She had to reach the level of a sixth-class disciple. Kong Xinmu bowed respectfully in front of the two Super Divine Dragon disciples guarding the door. The two disciples didn't delay, and one of them personally led him into the door. After entering the door, Kong Xinmu discovered that it was a very spacious space. First there was a walkway, and on both sides of the walkway there was a huge door every 10,000 feet. One could imagine that the Holy Tower's training area was behind the door. Every door was tightly shut, and it was obvious that someone was trying to pass the level. Soon, the Super Divine Dragon disciple brought Kong Xinmu to an open door and gave him a token. This token was a pass. The results and process of passing the level would be recorded on it. Finally, based on the record of the pass, one could become a disciple of the Holy Land of Five Extremes Mysterious Ice or raise the level of a disciple. Your training room is here, Yi Zichen said. The Super Divine Dragon disciple said to Kong Shinmu with a smile. Thank you, Senior. Kong Shinmu nodded, took the pass, and stepped into the door. The Super Divine Dragon disciple looked at Kong Shinmu's disappearing figure curiously. He was very doubtful that this fellow from the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor could pass the 4th level. One had to know that the 4th level of the Holy Tower of Five Extremes Mysterious Ice had different difficulties according to the category, but they were basically designed according to the difficulty of the 7th to 8th levels of the Dragon Emperor. Many Dragon Warriors' blood compatibility was only 55 or 56, and they would encounter a bottleneck before reaching this level. Therefore, to a large number of Dragon Warriors, it was very difficult to challenge the 4th level. As long as they could pass the 4th level of the Holy Tower, they could be considered as the backbone of the Holy Land of Five Extremes Mysterious Ice. Even many talented Dragon Warriors would only be able to clear the 4th floor of the Holy Tower when they were in their 30s. Chapter 46-89. Could a young dragon martial artist in his early 20s and Dragon Emperor's Divine Dragon Inheritance blood grade really clear the 4th level of the Holy Tower? The Super Divine Dragon Disciple Guard was doubtful, but he couldn't wait here due to his duty. As long as he waited for Kong Shinmu's challenge to end, the results would naturally be out. He turned and left. As for Kong Shinmu, after stepping through the door, he suddenly fell down. Outside the door was a large spherical space. There was no place for him to step on. Kong Shinmu immediately transformed into his black dragon form and flew in this spherical space. I wonder, what is the content of this trial? Kong Shinmu thought to himself as he observed the entire spherical space. This spherical space was even bigger than the underground training ground of the inn he was staying in. As expected of the Holy Tower of the Five Extremes Dark Ice, there were hundreds of such a large trial space on the 4th level. It was impossible to pass the Holy Tower in a short time. This trial was definitely not a test of the dragon martial artist's explosive power. If it were that simple, there wouldn't be any difficulty. Suddenly, Kong Shinmu discovered that a crystal ball had suddenly appeared in this spherical space. At the same time, a few lines of small words appeared on the challenge token in his hand. This trial has a total of 100 crystal balls. Each crystal ball has a different elemental ability and attack method. The challenger can use dragon martial techniques or dragon weapons to block the crystal ball's attack. When Kong Shinmu saw this, his heart stirred. Wasn't this a trial tailor-made for him? It was too easy for Kong Shinmu to block the attack of these crystal balls. This was because the difficulty of the 4th level was targeted at the Dragon Emperor's 7th level. And the ordinary attacks of the Dragon Emperor's 7th level were not difficult for Kong Shinmu. But he soon realized that was not the case. This trial was not for them to defend against the crystal ball's attack, but to dodge the crystal ball's attack. If they were hit by a crystal ball, 1 point would be deducted. The total score was 100 points. If he was attacked 40 times, he would basically be dead. Right now, there was only one crystal ball in the field. It felt like Kong Shinmu had already understood the content of this trial. The crystal ball suddenly swept towards Kong Shinmu. The array formation within it was activated, and a wave of ice and snow energy burst out. This burst of ice and snow energy transformed into an ice arrow, sweeping towards Kong Shinmu, tearing through the air at an extremely fast speed. Dat! Kong Shinmu did not even think and directly executed the Divine Dragon Tyrant body art into nimble stance. In his nimble state, Kong Shinmu's speed in executing any movement technique or dragon-type martial technique increased by several times. Furthermore, it allowed him to become more sensitive to the power of space and the void. Then, Kong Shinmu immediately flew to the side. But right after that, a second crystal ball appeared, and it was surprisingly in the direction that he had fled the first time. This second crystal ball directly erupted with a flame arrow, heading straight for Kong Shinmu. It looked like Kong Shinmu was directly colliding with this second crystal ball. Dat! Kong Shinmu's agility and speed had reached a rather terrifying level. After all, the effects of the Divine Dragon Tyrant body art were extremely obvious. Usually, he would also train to move in the state of nimble stance. He directly dodged the second time, but the third crystal ball appeared in the direction that he had dodged to. This required the dragon martial artists who participated in this trial to not only have a strong reaction speed, but they also needed to be fast enough and have enough endurance. Because, when the third crystal ball launched an attack at him, the first crystal ball launched another attack at him. So that's how it is. At the same time, there will be more and more crystal balls attacking me. There will be a total of 100 attacks. At least the first 60 attacks must be dodged. Otherwise, the next 40 attacks will be extremely dense, making it extremely difficult to dodge. Kong Shin-mu quickly understood the difficulty of this trial. If it was just a single attack, it would not be a problem for any dragon martial artist of this realm. This was because this crystal ball launched arrows of various attributes, and these arrows were very small. Although they were powerful, they spread like many silk threads, and the dragon martial artist could easily dodge them as long as he tilted his body slightly. However, if the number of arrows increased, the entire spherical space would probably be filled with the attacks of these arrows. This way, the difficulty would be very terrifying. In addition, the attacks of these crystal balls each had different attributes. When they streaked through the air, they would even affect the power of space, filling the area with that attribute. In a short period of time, Kong Shin-mu dodged 3 attacks, but there were already 2 ice lines and 1 flame line. There was no doubt that he could not touch these 3 lines during the process of dodging. I also have to plan my dodging route well, otherwise, the entire field will soon be filled with the attribute power lines. Kong Shin-mu's face darkened. This was an extremely difficult trial. Not only did it require speed and reflexes, but it also required wisdom and a sense of the overall situation. It was no wonder that even if he had the combat power comparable to that of a powerhouse on the 7th level of the Dragon Emperor, he might not be able to pass this level. Of course, if he did not have this level of combat power, he would probably be killed directly if those crystal balls hit him once. But now, he only needed to dodge 60 attacks and he would succeed. Immediately after that, each time he dodged, he only dodged very slightly. The body of the divine dragon would not fly too far, lest the entire spherical space become an impassable area too early. However, after he successfully dodged the joint attack of 20 crystal balls, he suddenly found that the next time he wanted to dodge, there was a wall in the direction he was trying to dodge. This transparent wall blocked his path. Therefore he had 2 choices. One was to go around the wall, and the other was to break the wall. Without a doubt, he chose to break the wall. If he went around the wall, it would disrupt the path of his crystal ball's attack arrows, causing the entire spherical space to be filled with those attribute power lines, making it impossible for him to dodge. After all, the body of the divine dragon was too big. If he did not calculate these things in advance, it would be almost impossible to pass this trial. The next moment, Kong Shin-mu instantly erupted into a strong offensive stance. 9th Stage Extreme Dao Dragon Explosion. Chapter 4690. Kong Shin-mu was extremely familiar with his black dragon body. He was even familiar with the position of every inch of his dragon scales. Therefore, he could now adjust his position with extreme precision and avoid the various attribute attacks released by the crystal balls. It's a bit of a waste. Kong Shin-mu's expression changed slightly. He discovered that the 9th Stage Extreme Dao Hui Dragon Burst that he had unleashed with all his strength had directly smashed the transparent wall. Moreover, the remaining power exploded towards the surroundings, even affecting the attack power released by the crystal balls. Originally, he could have been completely unaffected this time, but seeing his attack explode and spread out, and actually distorting the trajectory of several arrows that were about to land on his body, sword shadow flowing flash. Kong Shin-mu reacted quickly. He must not be hit even once. In the next moment, his figure instantly vanished from the battlefield, and then he appeared not too far away, narrowly dodging all the arrows that were coming at him. He knew that he was a little nervous, or that he had used too much power to attack the transparent wall. But before he really broke that wall, how could Kong Shin-mu know that it would be so fragile? Next time, he still had to use his strongest attack. Who knew if the next wall would be stronger or still be so fragile? In any case, if he used too much power, even if he changed the trajectory of the surrounding crystal ball's attacks, he could still use sword shadow flowing flash to save it. But if he couldn't break that wall, even if he could use sword shadow flowing flash to dodge, the transparent wall was likely to bring him trouble later. Therefore, once a transparent wall appeared, it had to be broken. Moreover, After Kong Shinmu dodged these 20 attacks, Kong Shinmu thought of a possibility. That was, these crystal balls attacks were likely to have other changes, and he had to be mentally prepared at all times. Moreover, there would not be a change every 20 attacks. Kong Shinmu had to think of any possibility in advance, so that he could be prepared. And soon, the facts proved that Kong Shinmu's guess was correct. After the 38th attack, he discovered that the arrows shot out by the crystal balls would actually change direction halfway through. This made it extremely difficult for him to dodge, but by relying on the sunset blade, he was still able to narrowly avoid all the arrows. However, every time he used the sunset blade, he didn't dare to dodge too far, lest he bring the crystal ball too far away and occupy the originally safe and spacious area. When the crystal ball's combined attack count reached 55, a third of the arena had been occupied by power lines of various attributes. These were the traces left behind by the arrows. Next, the crystal ball's combined attack was extremely concentrated. A total of dozens of arrows formed from condensed energy swept over, enveloping the area where Kong Shinmu was. Soon, Kong Shinmu was no longer able to dodge the arrows just by relying on his movement techniques. However, he didn't rely too much on the sunset blade. Instead, he used the extreme shadow flowing light, a movement technique that he hadn't used for a long time, the dragon martial skill. Although this dragon martial skill didn't increase his speed too much, the key was that it had been cultivated to the heaven rank. For the current Kong Shinmu, under the bonus of nimble stance, his flying speed was also doubled. During this period, he encountered 3 transparent walls blocking his way. There was even a hemispherical wall that covered half of his surroundings. Moreover, Kong Shinmu discovered that the defensive power of these transparent walls was getting stronger and stronger. Of course, every time, he would use his strongest power to shatter it. After shattering the 4 walls, Jiang Shinwu discovered that the 5th wall had appeared. When his attacks landed on the wall, he was unable to shatter it. Instead, he only managed to create some cracks on the wall. Kong Shinmu's expression darkened, and he immediately used the sunset blade to salvage the situation. He appeared behind the 5th wall in a flash, then turned around and burst out with a violent attack, completely smashing the wall. The power of 2 9-stage extreme dragon bursts caused the entire wall to explode in all directions. The trajectories of the arrows were also affected, all of them distorted. Kong Shinmu completely left that area. He discovered that after the 55th attack, he still hadn't been hit even once. Only 1/3 of the area was occupied by the power lines. It could be seen that if he wanted to obtain 60 points, it would be a piece of cake. He just needed to dodge 5 more attacks, and he would be able to pass. It was easier than he had imagined, but Kong Shinmu didn't just want to obtain 60 points. There was a rule in the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. If one could obtain 95 points or above on their first attempt, they could become a disciple of the next level. In other words, if Kong Shinmu could obtain 95 points this time, he could become a 5th-class disciple. Although he didn't know what other methods there were, it was impossible for Kong Shinmu not to try. In fact, his goal was to not be hit even once by those crystal balls. At the last moment, Kong Shinmu still had a trump card, so he might be able to do it. So, he continued to work hard. After the 55th attack, he discovered that the attacks of the crystal balls had changed again. Those power arrows actually possessed the power of the void, able to pierce through the void. The power lines that erupted from them were no longer straight lines, nor were they as simple as curved lines. Instead, they appeared intermittently in space, as if they were rapidly passing through space. This sort of passing through space was an extremely fast method. To obtain this sort of power, one had to rely on the power of the void. Luckily, Kong Shinmu had a deep understanding of the power of space, or in other words the power of the void. When those power arrows pierced through the void and were about to appear, he had already sensed some slight fluctuations in the void, so he immediately dodged them. Wanting to do this was extremely difficult. At least, for Kong Shinmu. He had to focus his full attention in order to distinguish where the power arrows would suddenly appear. These arrows pierced through the void at an extremely fast speed. If it were anyone else, they might not be able to completely dodge them. But Kong Shinmu didn't make the slightest mistake. The first arrow that pierced through the void was easily dodged by Kong Shinmu with his nimble movement techniques. This scene caused several powerhouses of the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land, who were secretly observing the situation, to nod their heads in satisfaction. their eyes filled with pleasant surprise. Chapter 4691. Kong Shinmu and Xiao Bai were qualified to come to the Dragon God's Great World because the higher-ups of the Five Extremes' mysterious Ice Holy Land had suggested it. After all, a genius who could kill Susan Luo should not be buried. Now these 5 young elders of the Five Extremes' mysterious Ice Holy Land were quite satisfied with Kong Shinmu's performance in the Sacred Tower. In fact, the door that Kong Shinmu had entered was the most difficult door on the 4th level of the Sacred Tower because there were too many things to test. Whether it was speed, explosiveness, endurance, or judgment of the overall situation, they all had very harsh requirements. Generally speaking, this challenge was used to test the commander-in-chief. Very few people would be arranged to go to this level. Usually, even if there were many dragon warriors queuing outside, this level would rather be left empty than open because the difficulty of this level was too high. For the vast majority of dragon warriors, as long as they did not meet the requirements in one aspect, it was very easy for them to not even reach 50 points. And now that Kong Shinmu had 55 points, it was still very easy. And looking at the situation, it was very likely that Kong Shinmu would be able to achieve a rather outstanding result on this level. I'm guessing that this kid can probably reach 80 points. Haha, 80 points? Aren't you overestimating this kid? Starting from 60 points, the difficulty of this level gets higher and higher. Even when we challenged this level on the 7th level, who could reach 80 points? This level is on the 4th level after all, so the requirements in all aspects are lower than when we challenged it. That's right. Moreover, the lower one's cultivation level, the easier it is to develop in all aspects. For example, this kid Kong Shinmu is doing very well now. You all underestimate him. This old man feels that this kid is very likely to reach 90 points. Oh my God, you think too highly of this kid. In history, not many people can reach 90 points. Even if the few of us challenge this level on the 7th level, we still won't be able to reach 90 points. The reason why it was said to be the 7th level was because other than the 4th level, only the 7th level had a level with the same rules. Logically speaking, these young elders could even reach 90 points in the 9th level of the Holy Tower. But that was because most of the other levels only tested the strength of the dragon martial artist. There were too many things to test in this stage. Strength alone would not be able to obtain a relatively high score. Therefore, even if these little elders went to the 7th floor to take this stage, they would not be able to reach 90 points. The last dozen waves of crystal balls and arrows were simply too terrifying. They felt that unless their comprehension of space reached a relatively high level, it was absolutely impossible to reach 90 points in this stage. After discussing for a while, they continued to observe Kong Shinmu's performance. Kong Shinmu had no idea that he was being observed. He continued to dodge the attacks from the crystal balls. Each wave was more intense than the last, and the speed of the arrows was faster. Not only could they turn, but they could also flash through the void. The last 5 waves of attacks were all spatial flashes, and the speed at which the arrows traveled through space increased. Kong Shinmu relied on his comprehension of the power of the void to accurately predict where the arrows would travel through space, thus avoiding them in advance. His success rate reached more than 60 points. After he successfully dodged 60 volleys of arrows, he soon discovered that the speed of the arrows that came after him was twice as fast as before. This caught him off guard. Not only were the arrows' attack speeds twice as fast, but the speed of the arrows that traversed through space was also twice as fast. Sometimes, the moment Jiang Shenwu sensed a fluctuation in the void, the arrows would already appear. Fortunately, Kong Shinmu was already used to the changes in the arrows' attacks. He was already prepared. Although he did not guess the exact situation, he still expected the increase in speed. Therefore, he directly erupted with an even more tyrannical speed. Previously, he had already reached the peak of the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body technique, but this time, under such an extremely difficult challenge, he seemed to have gained a brand new understanding. The main thing was that he was getting more and more proficient with the agile stance. In the past, he had rarely used the nimble stance. Most of the time, he would either use the aggressive stance or the defensive stance. However, this time, he had benefited a lot from using the nimble stance. It allowed his divine dragon body to become lighter and faster in the air. Even when he was dodging the arrows, Kong Shinmu already had some conditioned reflexes and could react without thinking. This was a huge transformation. Kong Shinmu even felt that if he could have enough heaven and earth spirit chi, He could even exchange for some essence materials from the prehistoric tyrant body beast. The divine dragon tyrant body technique was a body-refining dragon-type martial art technique researched from an ancient beast called the prehistoric tyrant body beast. Cultivating the divine dragon tyrant body technique required a lot of materials from the prehistoric tyrant body technique. The materials that Kong Shin-mu had exchanged for the prehistoric tyrant body technique were all sent from the dragon god's world to the dragon martial continent. Originally, he had not prepared much, but since Kong Shin-mu cultivated the divine dragon tyrant body technique, Yu Yaji prepared some for him. Those materials had basically been exchanged by Kong Shin-mu, which was why he could cultivate the divine dragon tyrant body technique to the peak of the heaven tier. And if he wanted to reach the saint tier, he would not only need the rising dragon marrow, but also more purifying materials from the prehistoric tyrant body beast. The 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land definitely had a lot of these materials. The contribution points of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land can be exchanged with gold dragon coins, or by contributing to the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. It is not too difficult to exchange for those materials. Kong Shin-mu decided that after joining the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land, the first thing he would do was exchange for some materials from the prehistoric tyrant body technique and cultivate the divine dragon tyrant body technique to the saint tier. That way, his defense would be even stronger, and his ability to change between the 3 stances would be even stronger. Although this dragon martial technique was not the holy dragon martial technique, to Kong Shin-mu, it was the source of all his strength. One could imagine how powerful the 9 Extreme Dao Hui Dragon Explosion would be if he successfully cultivated it. At this moment, Kong Shin-mu had gained some understanding of the divine dragon tyrant body technique's nimble stance. Instantly, his speed became faster, more nimble, and he dodged the arrows with ease. Even though the speed of the arrows had become twice as fast as before, not only did it not become difficult for Kong Shin-mu to dodge them, it became even easier instead. It was only when the crystal ball arrows shot out for the 70th time that Kong Shin-mu discovered that the arrows' attacks had changed once again. The arrows formed from different attributes had become thicker. Chapter 4692. These thick arrows made it even more difficult for Kong Shin-mu to dodge. He became even more focused and careful. The key was that he still had space to dodge. There was only half of the space left, and the remaining half of the space was filled with the power of the condensed arrows. These lines formed a net of light that Kong Shin-mu could not touch. Once he did, he would lose points. Therefore, he could only dodge in the remaining space. He also had to pay attention to not let the arrows fill up the entire space too quickly. He dodged step by step. Whether it was the arrows that were extremely fast, or the arrows that jumped through space, or the arrows that had illusionary effects, none of them could affect Kong Shin-mu. Once the illusionary power pulled the dragon martial artist into an illusion, it meant that the trial had come to an end. He would not be able to dodge any of the following attacks. But for Kong Shin-mu, not only did he have a firm willpower, he also had the consciousness of the demon god ancestor and the black dragon in his mind. Under such circumstances, what kind of illusion could make him fall for it? It was impossible. Therefore, this trial was extremely difficult. Ordinary people couldn't even reach 50 points. And now, Kong Shin-mu had already obtained more than 70 points. At this time, a transparent wall appeared in front of him. This transparent wall even had the effect of sealing off space, making it impossible for the dragon martial artist to travel through space to pass through this transparent wall. Moreover, the strength of this transparent wall had become extremely terrifying. Wind Snow Dragon Pattern Stone. Attack runes. Activate. Kong Shin-mu had no other choice but to use his trump card. After activating the Wind Snow Dragon Pattern Stone's attack runes, his strength had been greatly enhanced. Immediately after, a strong offensive 9th stage Extreme Dao Roaring Dragon Explosion directly erupted. This time, the transparent wall finally shattered. After the wall cracked, Kong Shin-mu rushed through it. Behind him, countless arrows completely flooded the space he was just in. If he had been a little slower, he would have been hit by those arrows immediately, and this way he would have lost 1 point. Although it was only 1 point, Kong Shin-mu did not want to lose any points, because it was very likely that it would be incomparably difficult to gain even 1 point later on. After breaking through the transparent wall, Kong Shin-mu realized that the defense of the transparent wall had basically reached the standard of an ordinary dragon warrior on the 8th level of the Dragon Emperor. However, for a true genius it was nothing. Next, it was very likely that an even stronger transparent wall would appear to block him. At that time, Kong Shinmu felt that he wouldn't have enough strength to break through the transparent wall. His attack power wasn't that strong to begin with, and he had only cultivated the 9th stage Extreme Dao Dragon Burst. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to walk this far. Following that, the arrows attacked even more fiercely. Moreover, as the number of crystal balls had reached more than 70, the number of crystal balls added together was too high. The net of light arrows that Jiang Shenwu had to dodge became denser and denser. It was not difficult for Kong Shinmu to avoid the 23 straight lines. Dodging the 56 straight lines, curves, and jumping dots was already somewhat difficult. But now, there were more than 70 straight lines, and these arrow lines were even faster. Together, they formed a huge net, directly enveloping Kong Shinmu. Although each attack would leave some gaps for him to dodge, Kong Shinmu could see that there were fewer and fewer directions for him to dodge. At the beginning, when there were still few lines, Kong Shinmu could easily find at least 3 gaps for him to fly out without touching those arrow lines. Later, there were only 2 gaps left. And now, with so many arrow lines forming a light net, there was only 1 gap left. With 1 gap, it became extremely difficult for Kong Shinmu to dodge. Moreover, on the 75th attack, Kong Shinmu realized that the gap had become a trap. Once he tried to escape through that gap, an arrow would immediately appear from the void above the gap. In other words, these arrow light net no longer had the slightest gap. Wanting to fly out by relying on a movement technique dragon martial skill was already impossible. There was only one way, and that was to use a dragon martial skill that could shuttle through the void. It just so happened that Kong Shinmu cultivated this method. Sun Shadow Flowing Sunset Flash was already a rather high-level illusory attribute dragon martial skill. It required a rather deep understanding of spatial power. Previously, Kong Shinmu had already devoured Linghu Daier's comprehension and feelings. His comprehension of this move was already quite terrifying, even reaching the level of those dragon martial artists who had studied this for more than 10 years. Therefore, Kong Shinmu did not pause at all when he used Sun Shadow Flowing Sunset Flash now. He knew that he had to use this move now. Fortunately, he did not have any difficulty in using this move now. It could be said that he could use it as he wished. Moreover, after using it once, he could immediately use it a second time. In this trial space, there was no energy for Kong Shinmu to devour. Therefore, the energy within his body was being consumed more and more. Fortunately, he did not need to consume too much energy to use Sun Shadow Flowing Sunset Flash now. This was because he had a higher understanding of void power or spatial power. The current Kong Shinmu was already used to using Sun Shadow Flowing Sunset Flash like walking or eating. He used it several times in a row without a single pause. He finally dodged a total of 80 arrow attacks. It could be said to be quite amazing. Even the many young elders of the 5 extreme mysterious Ice Holy Land, who were observing him, were already shocked. This kid could really reach 80 points. After reaching 80 points, the attacks of those arrows would become even faster. And most importantly, these arrows would begin to attack indiscriminately. Previously, the arrows from the crystal balls were concentrated on the dragon martial artists who were undergoing the trial. But following this, these arrows would shoot randomly without any line of defense. In other words, the entire area would soon be completely enveloped by the energy lines. As the number of energy lines increased, the dragon martial artists would definitely not be able to dodge. The less space there was to dodge, the easier it was to be hit by the arrows. Moreover, the number of these crystal balls arrows increased with each attack. Immediately after, Kong Shinmu discovered this point. After the 80th volley of the crystal balls, Kong Shinmu discovered that these arrow lines were actually flying randomly in the entire area. This completely disrupted his plan. Originally, he was planning to slowly dodge, leaving more space for him to dodge at the end. But looking at it now, after the 80th volley of attacks, the entire area would soon be covered with a net of arrow light. Chapter 4693. Kong Shinmu began the most difficult journey. All the arrows began to explode randomly, filling up the remaining empty space. For a short period of time, Jiang Shenwu was even safer. This was because the arrows were no longer targeting him, so the arrows that were shooting at him became even fewer. Thus, It was even easier for him to dodge. But, if he wanted to use the wind shadow flowing afterglow to dodge again, it became more difficult. Because there were only a few places left in the entire field that could accommodate his divine dragon body. If it wasn't for the fact that this was an experiential learning and experiential learning had its rules, Kong Shinmu even wanted to remove his divine dragon form. In that case, he could proceed with this experiential learning in his human form, which would definitely be much easier. After the 80th time, every time the crystal ball exploded an attack, Kong Shinmu would immediately find the blind spot of all the attacks, and use the wind shadow flowing afterglow in advance, flashing to the relatively empty space, dodging the attack this time. Just after the 5th time, Kong Shinmu found that he had nowhere to hide. Countless arrow lines had already condensed into a giant net in the field, connecting the entire giant net. As long as the body of the Dragon Emperor was 10,000 feet long, in this place, it was absolutely impossible not to touch any line. And as long as one of the attacks touched the line, then Kong Shinmu's final score would be reduced by 1 point. Now, Kong Shinmu had persisted until the 85th attack, simply reaching his limit. What followed next was the craziest moment. At this time, not only was the entire field filled with arrow lines, but most importantly, there were already 85 crystal balls, and each crystal ball no longer shot only one arrow like before. Instead, each crystal ball shot out 10 arrows. These arrows were like a meteor shower, streaking across the field. At the same time, another layer of transparent wall appeared around Kong Shinmu's body, sealing his whole body. This transparent wall was even harder, and it was not something that Kong Shinmu could break in one shot. Basically, from this point on, any dragon warrior who tried to pass would almost have to admit defeat, because every attack from the crystal ball was basically impossible to dodge. Unless he had cultivated some profound spatial technique. That was something that could only be achieved by cultivating one's virtual energy to an extremely high level. And it just so happened that Kong Shinmu had devoured the power of the Extreme Saint Realm's Wind Shadow Streak. At this moment, countless arrows that seemed unavoidable shot toward Kong Shinmu, and there was even an incomparably solid, transparent wall around him that enclosed his entire divine dragon body. It was also at this moment that Kong Shinmu's comprehension of the wind shadow flowing sunset flash reached its peak. He had finally broken through. Saint-ranked wind shadow flowing cloud flash. At this moment, Kong Shinmu's comprehension of the Tao of space rose once again. Immediately after, he created an alternate dimension on the spot and hid his black dragon body in it. This strange space was the effect of the Soon shadow flowing cloud flash. It could allow people to temporarily hide inside, which was equivalent to a dragon warrior hiding in a foreign land. At this moment, Kong Shinmu's body almost disappeared from the scene, no longer existing in this level. Only the strange space still existed in this space, and it was hit by countless sword servants' lines. However, this did not count as hitting Kong Shinmu. He had successfully dodged this wave of arrows. If his comprehension of the Tao of space was higher, he could even continue hiding in this strange space and not come out. That way, he would not be hit by the arrows. Unfortunately, this method of hiding in the strange space could only last for a short time. After almost 3 breaths, the strange space created by Kong Shinmu directly shattered. He fell out of the strange space, and immediately after, the crystal ball attacked him. This was the 87th attack. At this moment, Kong Shinmu really had no way to use the Soon shadow flowing cloud flash in succession. He could only watch helplessly as the arrows landed on his body. The power of these arrows still had considerable lethality. If his strength was slightly weaker, he might even be directly pierced through. But at that moment, Kong Shinmu directly stimulated the guardian stance and easily blocked the attack of these arrows. His whole body was splashed with blood, but not much blood. Those arrows only shattered some of his dragon scales. If he wanted to recover, he could quickly recover. It was not too serious an injury. On the 87th attack, Kong Shinmu failed to dodge and was hit by the countless sword servants. This was the first point he was deducted. But immediately after, he felt that he had almost recovered. When the next attack came, he once again used the Soon shadow flowing cloud flash and hid in the strange space. In this strange space, he was absolutely safe. No matter what kind of power, it would not be able to pass through. Unfortunately, after 3 breaths, Kong Shinmu once again fell out of the strange space. This strange space could not last for long, and creating it consumed a lot of power. Kong Shinmu could only try to swallow the surrounding heaven and earth spiritual energy, transforming it into swallowing energy. This way, his strength would recover a little. Unfortunately, this recovery rate was not great. He also had no way of swallowing the surrounding energy of the arrows. In truth, he should be able to do so, but he would not do so because that would be the same as cheating. What if the 5 extremes Dark Ice Holy Land counted him as a failure? Therefore, Kong Shinmu did not want to cheat. But he still did not give up on the thought of obtaining 95 points. This was a chance. The difference between a 5th grade disciple and a 4th grade disciple was not small. Once he became a 5th grade disciple, he would enjoy even more rich rewards. After he barely managed to recover his strength, he was once again hit by countless arrows. Sun Shadow Flowing Cloud Flash. Strange space. Create. Just like that, Kong Shinmu created a strange space to avoid the first wave of attacks. Then the strange space collapsed. Unable to create another strange space for the next wave, he could only be hit by the arrows and rely on his body to block them. This scene was also very shocking, but Kong Shinmu's current method was even more shocking. Kong Shinmu actually relied on his own strength to directly dodge the 95th attack, and it was in that strange space. At this time, Kong Shinmu used the strange space to attack again and again, dodging each attack. Therefore, he was hit a total of 5 times. Next, he could not be hit again. According to his current pace, the highest score he could obtain was 92 points. He could not be promoted to a 5th grade disciple. However, immediately after that, Jiang Shunwu's mind suddenly had a lot of enlightenment. This wave of enlightenment came from the alternate dimensions that he had repeatedly created. This directly increased the grade of his inheritance of the power of the void. Moreover, it gave Kong Shinmu a great improvement in the creation of the strange space. Most importantly, Kong Shinmu took out the Heaven Oasis Immortal Disc and planned to use it. He could take out the Heaven Oasis Immortal Disc from Susan Luo and use it. It should be known that this kind of void energy weapon was not only used by the void human tribe. As long as one had a comprehension of the power of the void and was proficient in spatial techniques, they could use a void energy weapon. Chapter 4694. With the appearance of the Heavenly Oasis Immortal Disc, Kong Shinmu's perception of the surrounding void power was raised to another level. The Wind Shadow Flowing Cloud Flash was not likely to be improved in a short period of time. However, with the support of the Heavenly Oasis Immortal Disc, Kong Shinmu was able to create another alternate space. The appearance of this alternate space could last for tens of breaths of time. Kong Shinmu could hide in it and wait for the attacks to end. The reason why he did not use this technique earlier was because he was afraid that the alternate space would restrict him from using it. However, he did not feel restricted after trying a few times. Hence, he could use the enhanced alternate space and hide in it with the Wind Shadow Flowing Cloud Flash. In this way, he could still guarantee that he would score above 95 points. When the alternate space appeared, Kong Shinmu flew into it with the Heavenly Oasis Immortal Disc. Immediately after, countless light arrows shot towards the alternate space. Previously, the light arrows would be absorbed by the alternate space, which was equivalent to flying into the void. However, this time, Kong Shinmu realized that something was different. These arrow lights actually penetrated through the entrance of the alternate dimension. Moreover, this time, each crystal ball actually released hundreds of arrows. This scene gave Kong Shinmu a huge shock. How could the last 5 attacks be so terrifying? Even the alternate space could follow them in. A total of tens of thousands of arrows swept towards Kong Shinmu in the alternate space like a torrential downpour. This alternate space was a very small area. There was no way that Kong Shinmu could avoid it. Furthermore, if he was hit by tens of thousands of arrows, even with Kong Shinmu's current defensive strength, he would be severely injured. This was because there were too many arrows. The young elders who were watching the battle from the outside could not see the situation in the alternate space, but they could guess. When they saw the tens of thousands of arrows shooting into the alternate dimension, their taut hearts finally relaxed. Fortunately, this kid will definitely not be able to avoid the last 5 attacks. If he really dodges these 5 attacks, won't he get 95 points? This crystal arrow level has reached 95 points. The last time it appeared was Emperor Shi from more than 100 years ago. However, if this kid had used that phantom weapon right from the start, He wouldn't have been hit on the 90th to 95th attack, and his points would have been deducted. Yeah, this kid doesn't know the rules. Otherwise, he would have only been hit by the last 5 attacks. That way, he would have gotten 95 points. The 5 little elders chatted and laughed. First of all, 90 points was already shocking enough. This was the most difficult level of the Sacred Tower, and it wasn't just in the 5 extreme Black Ice Holy Land. The other Holy Lands also had such a level, and it was called the Crystal Arrow level. In the other Holy Lands, there were also very few people who could reach 95 points. Once a Dragon Warrior could score 95 points, it meant that the Dragon Warrior's ability to see the big picture and react on the spot was extremely strong. It was enough for him to be the leader of the Holy Land of the Dragon God world. Of course, this was under the condition that they were not clear about the rules. If they were clear about the rules, then there were still many people who could reach 95 points. But under the condition that they were not clear about the rules, it was already extremely difficult for a youth like Kong Shin-mu to reach 60 points, let alone 95 points. So in the eyes of these 5 little elders, Kong Shin-mu being able to score 90 points was already quite outstanding. Unfortunately, he did not reach 95 points. According to the rules, Kong Shin-mu could not be made an exception to become a 5th-grade disciple. Even if they had arranged for Kong Shin-mu to go through the most difficult level of this Crystal Arrow level, not reaching 95 points meant that he did not reach it. The rules could not be broken. Let's go and welcome this kid. The 5 little elders looked at each other and smiled. Their figures disappeared from that secret chamber. When they reappeared, they were already outside the door that Kong Shin-mu was in. Soon, the door opened. Kong Shin-mu removed his divine dragon form, and his black-robed figure slowly flew out. The moment he came out, he saw the 5 little old men, and he could feel the extremely powerful aura from them. Although they did not have supreme inherited blood essence, these 5 people were probably the top existences among the super divine dragons. Who were these 5 people? Kong Shin-mu was stunned for a moment. He did not know the identity of these 5 people. Young friend Kong Shin-mu, congratulations. This time, you have reached 90 points in the Crystal Arrow level. You are completely qualified to become a disciple of our 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. This old man is the little elder of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land, Elder Chen Jin. Young friend, why don't you acknowledge this old man as your master? One of the old men wearing a golden robe immediately said, his eyes lighting up. Old Jin, get lost. An old man wearing a purple robe pushed the old man away, and came in front of Kong Shin-mu. He looked at him with a burning gaze and said, young friend, this old man is Elder Zhenlei. Why don't you acknowledge this old man as your master? My granddaughter is 18 years old now, and she has no one in her heart. Following that, the remaining 3 old men also blew their beards and glared at him, causing Kong Shin-mu to be dumbfounded. What was going on? And Kong Shin-mu coughed and took out the challenge token. He showed it to the 5 little elders and said, elders and seniors, this junior did not just obtain 90 points, but 95 points. What? The 5 little elders were instantly shocked, and they did not dare to believe it. But when they looked at the challenge token in Kong Shin-mu's hand, and saw the ancient words 95 on it, their expressions changed drastically. This is impossible. They were so scared that they almost peed their pants. 95 points? How was this possible? Didn't this mean that this kid's ability and talent were comparable to Emperor Shi's? One had to know that Emperor Shi was one of the strongest people in the Holy Land of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice. In other words, in the future, Kong Shin-mu would become another super strong person in the Holy Land of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice? Unbelievable! Originally, they were only slightly looking forward to the kid who could kill Susan Luo, but now it seemed that this kid's talent was even more terrifying than they had expected. So what if he killed Susan Luo? With Emperor Shi's talent in the past, killing someone at the level of Susan Luo was as easy as taking something out of one's pocket. So when Kong Shin-mu killed Susan Luo, it was probably nothing, right? They had heard that when this kid killed Susan Luo, who was at the 4th level of the Emperor realm, he was only at the 3rd level of the Dragon Emperor's inheritance. Moreover, his cultivation was only at the 3rd level of the Samsara realm. What a super genius! However, the 5 little elders could not figure out how Kong Shin-mu had avoided the last 5 attacks. Chapter 4695. In fact, Kong Shinmu had initially thought that he would definitely be hit by those arrows. However, under such circumstances, he could only use his last resort, which was the devouring power. The devouring power surged out. No matter how many arrows came at him, they were all completely devoured by Kong Shinmu's devouring power. Then, the power of these arrows returned to Kong Shinmu's power. Although there was some loss, the next 5 arrow attacks were all devoured by Kong Shinmu. The power of these arrows was not very strong. Originally, they were only meant for people to dodge. Therefore, it was very easy for Kong Shinmu to devour them. Even if there were tens of thousands of arrows, he could directly devour them. Besides the devouring power, other powers were ineffective against these arrows. In other words, if other powers tried to condense dragon techniques to block these arrows, they would be considered to have been attacked and points would be deducted. As long as the arrows came into contact with the power of the challenger, points would be deducted. Therefore, only Kong Shinmu could use this method. The premise of the deduction of points was that these arrows came into contact with Kong Shinmu's power. However, as soon as these arrows came into contact with Kong Shinmu's power, they would be devoured and transformed into his own power. Of course, this would not count as Kong Shinmu being hit by these arrows. This could be said to be a shameless method. However, the last 5 attacks of the crystal arrow level might also be shameless methods. Therefore, as long as Kong Shinmu could reach 95 points, everything else did not matter. However, he did not know how big of a storm he had caused. One had to know that the last 5 attacks of the crystal arrow level were something that even Emperor Shi had not been able to dodge. This required opening up a huge alternate dimension and subdividing the alternate dimension. This kind of method could only be comprehended after reaching the level of Super Shenron. That was the level of Supreme God. No matter which race or which inheritance they cultivated, after reaching the Supreme God level, they would definitely dabble in the power of space, and they would have a deeper understanding of it. Of course, if the Void humans specialized in the inheritance of the power of Void, their understanding of the power of space would be even deeper. Therefore, in the Emperor level, almost no one could dodge the last 5 attacks. But now, Kong Shinmu had done it. How could this not cause the 5 young elders to be inexplicably shocked? How old was Kong Shinmu? To have such a deep understanding of the power of space and be able to activate a heaven-level phantom weapon, it was clear that Kong Shinmu's understanding of space had reached an extremely terrifying level. Generally, dragon warriors who could use a phantom weapon were few. They had to at least reach the level of a Super Shenron to be able to activate a phantom weapon. But now, Kong Shinmu could activate it. This young man's talent was too terrifying. The 5 minor elders had originally thought that Jiang Shenwu was a genius comparable to Emperor Shi, but from the looks of it now, he was a little incredible. If this kid was clear about the rules, he might even be able to get a full score in this round, 100 points. This is too terrifying. We don't even have the qualifications to be his mentor. The 5 junior elders thought to themselves. They were only at the pinnacle of the super mystical dragons. There would always be a barrier between them and the supreme mystical dragon level. They would probably never be able to cross it in this lifetime. But Kong Shinmu was destined to become a supreme existence. Moreover, his ability to see the big picture and command was quite outstanding, which could be seen from his performance at the Crystal Arrow stage. This matter had to be reported to the higher-ups. Originally, the 5 elders could decide on Kong Shinmu's placement, but now, they had to report it and let the higher-ups make the decision. Elder Qianjin wore a solemn expression as he said to Kong Shinmu, "Today's performance must be kept a secret from the outside world. Truth be told, this Crystal Arrow trial is a special trial used to test geniuses. Now that you have passed this trial, according to the rules, you will become a 5th-grade disciple of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land." This news might reach Emperor Shi's ears. It is very likely that Emperor Shi will personally accept you as a disciple. You should be mentally prepared. Of course, even if Emperor Shi does not accept you, you don't have to worry. With the 5 of us here, you can apply for all the resources in the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. Of course, it is only an application. If you want to obtain those resources, you must make corresponding contributions to the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. Yes, I understand. Kong Shinmu nodded seriously. Emperor Shi accepting him as a disciple. This was a rather good experience for Kong Shinmu. After all, Although he had mentors in the past, they were not considered masters. Until now, he had yet to meet a true master. Emperor Shi was a supreme existence. If he was accepted as a disciple by her, wouldn't that be a great thing? His status in the Five Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land would rise instantly. Of course, Kong Xinmu did not bite off more than he could chew. In the end, he still needed to be talented enough. Very quickly, the 5 junior elders split up and left. They all had their own things to do. There was also the matter of Kong Xinmu that needed to be reported to various parties. However, there was still an elder Li Hua who personally led Kong Xinmu out of the sacred tower. Young friend, follow this old man to the Holy Land's 5th district and settle down. A junior elder personally led him to settle down. This kind of treatment could be said to be something that no one else had received in the past 10 years. Even Yu Yaji had not received such treatment. This showed how much importance the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land currently placed on Kong Xinmu. After all, the appearance of such a genius meant that the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land would likely produce another top-notch powerhouse after a few years. To any Holy Land, this was an extremely important matter. Kong Xinmu did not hesitate, but he still said, "My friend should be challenging the 3rd level now. I want to wait for her." All right. It's Qi Xiaobai, right? Elder Li Hua stroked his beard and had a knowing look on his face. Young man, work hard. This Miss Qi's talent is also not bad. If you can maintain it, your future in the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land will be bright. Looking at Elder Li Hua's expression, Kong Xinmu knew that he must have misunderstood the relationship between him and Xiaobai. However, to Xiaobai, it did not really matter. Normally, Kong Xinmu could feel that Xiaobai was already somewhat dependent on him. Of course, this dependence was not too deep. It was just that when she was with Kong Xinmu, Xiaobai basically did not make any decisions. She would directly leave it to Kong Xinmu. Perhaps this was also called trust. Kong Xinmu did not think too much about it. Soon, he followed Elder Li Hua and landed on the plaza outside the sacred tower. Chapter 4696. In the square below the sacred tower, Kong Xinmu realized that everyone around him was looking at him with envy. Even some super mystical dragon-level powerhouses were the same. This made Kong Xinmu puzzled. Was there a need to make such a big deal out of it? Of course, it was good that it was a big deal. If everyone knew his identity and status, then there would be much less trouble in the future. With Elder Li Hua standing beside Kong Xinmu, no one dared to come over and ask questions. However, everyone looked in Kong Xinmu's direction and whispered to each other in amazement. In fact, these people did not know how highly Kong Xinmu was regarded. He did not pass the other ordinary checkpoints to reach 95 points, but he passed the Crystal Arrow checkpoint and reached 95 points. This was a completely different concept. However, it was normal that ordinary disciples of the Sacred Tower did not know about this. Suddenly, a young man who looked like he was from the Holy Land of 5 Extremes mysterious ice ran towards Kong Xinmu. Everyone's expression changed. Who was this? Didn't he see the little elder of the Holy Land accompanying Kong Xinmu? Who dared to rush over so rudely? This young man was undoubtedly Gu Xinyue's cousin. Her cousin had been observing and waiting all this while. Finally, the news came. This Kong Xinmu actually obtained 95 points in the 4th level of the Sacred Tower and became a 5th grade disciple. This shocked him and made him feel despair. What shocked him was that such a thing had not happened for many years. Breaking the rules to increase one's rank basically only happened to the top geniuses. And what made him feel despair was that with such an opponent and love rival, what confidence did he have to compete? As for his admiration for Xiaobai, this young man could only let it rot in his stomach. Of course, he also felt that it was not really admiration. It was just a kind of admiration that normal people would have when they saw a talented girl. It was impossible for him to say that he really adored Xiaobai. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to confess. This young man's name was Gu Qinglian. It was a very poetic name, but judging from his temperament, he did not seem to be the kind of person who was unrestrained. Instead, he seemed to be slightly dull and did not seem to be very clever. Of course, Gu Qinglian's character was quite good. At this moment, Gu Qinglian ran to Kong Xinmu and congratulated him. "Congratulations, Brother Jiang. Also, Junior Gu Qinglian greets Senior Elder. Gu Qinglian. Elder Li Hua was not angry. Instead, he felt that Gu Qinglian looked familiar. Do you have a cousin? Yes, Gu Xinyue is my cousin. Gu Qinglian immediately said. She was quite proud of herself. Even the elder recognized my cousin. It could be seen that my cousin was really amazing. Then you'll have to work harder. I'm afraid Gu Xinyue will become a 6th class disciple this time, and you? Elder Li Hua glanced at Gu Qinglian and felt like sighing. He knew that he could not be disappointed. After all, there were very few geniuses in this world. Gu Xinyue was already considered a genius, so it was normal for Gu Qinglian's talent to be average. However, when he saw Gu Qinglian's cultivation and the grade of the Divine Dragon's inheritance blood essence, Elder Li Hua felt that this kid probably did not have a bright future. It was also a pity for the 5 extreme dark ice holy land. Fortunately, they recruited a top genius this time. Elder Li Hua looked at Kong Xinmu. The more he looked, the more satisfied he was. He was just short of holding Kong Xinmu in his palm. You are Gu Xinyue's cousin? Kong Xinmu looked at Gu Qinglian in surprise. That's right. After Gu Qinglian met the elder, he naturally chatted with Kong Xinmu. He came over and chuckled. Brother Jiang, you are too strong this time. You made an exception to become a 5th class disciple. You are even more amazing than my sister. Not at all. There was a bit of luck involved. Kong Xinmu smiled modestly. How can this be luck? Gu Qinglian laughed. That's impossible. That's completely impossible. Why don't I see others with this kind of luck? Don't you think? I didn't expect that you could become a 5th class disciple right after joining the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land. My cousin stayed in the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land for many years before becoming a 5th class disciple. When she first joined the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land, she was only a 2nd class disciple. You guys are different. You have many opportunities and can try every year. Kong Xinmu smiled and shook his head. This is my first time coming to the Dragon God's great world, so I have accumulated a lot in the small world. You can say that I have accumulated a lot. In fact, if he was also a dragon martial artist from the Dragon God's great world, he would have joined the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land long ago. He would not have such amazing results today. No matter what, Gu Qinglian absolutely admired Kong Xinmu now. And this time, Gu Qinglian came to find Kong Xinmu not just to get familiar with him. She mainly wanted to talk to Kong Xinmu about exploring the Supreme Relic with the younger generation of the Gu family. The exploration of the Supreme Relic was a big deal. The Supreme Relic that the Gu family discovered recently was a rule that only inheritors of the Dragon Emperor's 5th level and below could enter. Even those who were at the 5th level could not enter. So, Kong Xinmu happened to be on this line. With Kong Xinmu's strength, if he entered the Supreme Relic, he would definitely gain a lot. Gu Qinglian only came to ask Kong Xinmu what he thought. Since he had become a 5th class disciple of the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land, the cultivation resources he would receive would definitely be more than expected. Did he still want to explore the Supreme Relic? After all, in Gu Qinglian's opinion, Kong Xinmu would definitely be trained by the 5 Extreme Dark Ice Holy Land. He did not need to worry too much about cultivation resources. There was no need for him to take risks in the Supreme Relic. However, after hearing this, Kong Xinmu quickly said, Since I promised Gu Xinyue, I will definitely go. Nothing can change my decision. Moreover, now that the Dragon God's great world is facing a crisis, how can I hide in the back? I hope to get some useful things in the Supreme Relic and make some contributions to the Dragon God's great world. In fact, Kong Xinmu only cared about the bones of the supreme experts in the core of the Supreme Relic. But of course, this purpose could not be revealed. On the other hand, if Kong Xinmu really found some legendary antiques in the Supreme Relic, it would really be a contribution to the Dragon God's great world. Moreover, Kong Xinmu would also receive a lot of rewards. However, exploring the Supreme Relic required competition with others. There were also many powerful existences of other races who were stuck at the 4th level of the Emperor stage. The pressure of competition was great, and the danger was also great. In the Supreme Relic one could be killed at will. There was no guarantee of one's life. Chapter 4697. When Kong Shinmu saw Elder Li Hua frowning, he smiled faintly and explained to Elder Li Hua, "Senior Elder, geniuses don't appear out of thin air. I didn't achieve what I have today just because of talent. I believe that a person like you must have experienced many life and death situations. Senior, which of the dragon martialists with the same status and strength as you haven't walked on the edge of death?" Initially, Elder Li Hua was a little reluctant to let Kong Shinmu explore the supreme relic. It was really too dangerous. However, after hearing what Kong Shinmu said, he suddenly saw the light. Sigh. I was thinking too much. The older one gets, the more they want to regain what they have lost. Little did they know that it was because of this that they restricted their own thoughts. It was obvious that Elder Li Hua had experienced many things in the past and had many experiences. However, he didn't refute what Kong Shinmu had said. Instead, he agreed with it and even praised it. Clearly, he felt that it wasn't a bad thing for Kong Shinmu to have a fighting spirit. Only those who were tempered through life and death could become true powerhouses. Be it in terms of reflexes or willpower, they weren't something an ordinary dragon martialist could compare to. Elder Li Hua could also see that Kong Shinmu had achieved what he had today not only because of talent, but also because of his hard work. No one knew how much hard work Kong Shinmu had put in. Elder Li Hua actually wanted to refute such a hard work and not want him to risk his life. Little did he know that this would really stifle the limits of Kong Shinmu's future growth. Since Elder Li Hua was suddenly enlightened, then this matter was settled. Kong Shinmu and the 4 young men from the Gu family would head to the supreme relic that was limited to level 5 emperor grade and below. Of course, Xiaobai would definitely go along with Kong Shinmu. There was a total of 6 people. Such a team wasn't considered too big among the teams exploring the supreme relic, but it wasn't considered small either. Looking at the terrain, that supreme relic didn't seem to be an important supreme relic, so it didn't attract many experts from other races this time. Generally speaking, the lower the grade of these supreme ruins, the lower the quality of the treasures inside. This was a publicly acknowledged fact, but it did not exclude the possibility that some low-grade supreme ruins would also produce incomparably precious items. For example, Susan Luo had once obtained an item used by an ancient ancestor of the Void human tribe. Now that item had become one of the holy items of the Void human tribe, and Su Senluo's family had obtained extremely great rewards because of it. Even Su Senluo himself had obtained countless honors and fame. Of course, Su Senluo was powerful on one hand. On the other hand, he wasn't the most powerful level 4 Emperor stage cultivator. He had only obtained the holy relic of the Void human tribe, which was why his status was so respected. His fame was enhanced by a halo. Therefore, even with Kong Shinmu's current strength, he definitely couldn't underestimate anyone after entering the supreme relic. It was very likely that there would be many top-notch geniuses among the teams that the other races would send into the supreme relic. It was even possible that some of them were even stronger than Su Senluo. The tentative departure time was 5 days later. Kong Shinmu had 5 days to familiarize himself with the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land before he set off. This time, he had made an exception to become a 5th-class disciple of the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land, so he would receive the first batch of relatively rich cultivation resources. This was considered very rich for Kong Shinmu, so he couldn't miss it. Following this, everyone continued to wait. Not long after, Xiaobai finally came out of the 3rd level of the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Tower. She had successfully passed the 3rd level of the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Tower, but she hadn't obtained more than 95 points. After all, not everyone was as terrifyingly talented as Kong Shinmu. However, she had also obtained a high score of around 80 points, which was considered very good. Not only had she successfully become a 3rd-class disciple of the 5 Extremes mysterious Ice Holy Land, she could also obtain a batch of additional cultivation resources as a reward. This batch of cultivation resources was very important to Kong Shinmu and Xiaobai, but they couldn't absorb them now. This was because they had just broken through not long ago, and it was time for them to consolidate their cultivation. However, there were some spiritual energy essence rewards, which were unique to the dragon god's great world. They could strengthen a dragon martial artist's perception and understanding of various elemental powers, so that the dragon martial artist's cultivation speed of dragon martial techniques could be increased. This was not bad for Kong Shinmu. As for the cultivation resources for the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the dragon mark energy, Kong Xinmu didn't plan to take them for the time being. Therefore, he discussed with elderly Hua and asked if he could give him all the spiritual energy essence as a reward. In this case, perhaps Kong Xinmu could directly increase his understanding of the 9 extremes dragon burst, and this exploration of the supreme relic would be safer. He didn't even need to give him an equivalent amount of spiritual energy essence. It was fine to lose some. No problem. Elderly Hua directly agreed to Kong Xinmu's request. He had the authority to do this himself. The total value of this batch of cultivation resources reached a total of 1,000 gold dragon coins. This was equivalent to buying a high-grade Holy Spirit Dragon martial technique. Of course, this was the cultivation resources reward that Kong Xinmu received. And Xiaobai had obtained 80 points in the process of clearing the trial, so she could only get about 220 gold dragon coins. If an ordinary third-class disciple joined the Holy Land, he could only get about 100 gold dragon coins worth of cultivation resources. These were all one-time rewards. After that, every disciple of the 5 extremes mysterious ice Holy Land could also get different amounts of cultivation resources according to their respective ranks. For example, Kong Xinmu was a 5th-class disciple. According to the standard of a 5th-class disciple, he would be given 25 gold dragon coins of cultivation resources every month. In addition, he could also cultivate in the 5th-class disciple area. The dragon mark energy there was already extremely rich. And Xiaobai was a 3rd-class disciple. The monthly reward she received was only about 9 gold dragon coins. Actually, 9 gold dragon coins was already a lot. If one didn't live extravagantly, it would be enough for a dragon practitioner to live for a year. Of course, to a dragon practitioner who was in a hurry to increase their strength, this amount of gold dragon coins wasn't even enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. But this was free, so they naturally couldn't get too many. If one wanted to obtain more cultivation resources, there were many missions in the 5 extremes mysterious ice Holy Land. Especially during this time of war, there were many less dangerous intelligence missions that could be accepted. If one could complete all of these missions, they could obtain rewards that were much more than their monthly stipend. Chapter 4698. Of course, the Holy Lands of 5 extremes mysterious ice didn't give out their monthly salary in the form of gold dragon coins. Instead, they gave out cultivation resources directly. If they sold these cultivation resources, there would definitely be some losses. This time, Jiang Xinwu had obtained 1,000 gold dragon coins worth of cultivation resources. He could easily obtain 980 gold dragon coins worth of spirit chi essence. Moreover, it was a darkness attribute darkness essence. These essences were produced by the various supreme holy lands. For example, the holy lands of 5 extremes mysterious ice could produce ice attribute dark essence. They were used to exchange other attributes spiritual chi essences with other holy lands. This kind of spiritual chi essence could improve a dragon martial artist's mastery and comprehension of their respective dragon martial techniques. To Kong Xinmu, the most important thing for him to improve his combat strength now was whether he could improve his dragon martial techniques. Kong Xinmu thought about it and finally made a decision with elderly Hua. He needed the dark attribute spiritual chi essence worth 800 gold dragon coins and the beast core of the prehistoric tyrant body beast, which was worth 130 gold dragon coins. This was something that could be used to cultivate the divine dragon tyrant body art to a higher level. It was also very effective in improving Kong Xinmu's combat strength. As for the remaining 50 gold dragon coins, he planned to exchange them for cash. Small amounts of cash were allowed. Moreover, Kong Xinmu's talent was clear for all to see. Elderly Hua and the other junior elders thought highly of him. One had to know that when Emperor Shi returned, Kong Xinmu would become Emperor Shi's personal disciple. His identity and status would be different. Even if it was elderly Hua, he would be willing to do it for Kong Xinmu for 50 gold dragon coins. After all, it was just a small matter. To a dragon martial artist at the level of Dragon Emperor, 50 gold dragon coins wasn't a small amount. However, to elderly Hua, who was at the pinnacle of the divine dragon realm, 50 gold dragon coins really wasn't much. The cultivation resources that they needed for their cultivation would easily cost a few thousand gold dragon coins. As for the 50 gold dragon coins, Kong Xinmu planned to return them to Senior One Ren Yu. After Xiaobai came out, her and Kong Xinmu's results were quickly announced. shocking all the dragon warriors around the 5 extreme mysterious ice tower. Furthermore, this news would probably spread to the surroundings very quickly, and even to the other sacred grounds. Especially a genius like Kong Shin-mu, whose fame would soon spread throughout the whole dragon god's world. Then, Elder Li Hua personally brought Xiao Bai and Kong Shin-mu to settle down. Elder Li Hua led them directly to a space-time array. If they wanted to head to the 5 extreme mysterious ice Holy Land's disciple region, they couldn't just fly in. Most importantly, there were restrictions outside the disciple region. Even if one was a disciple of the 5 extreme dark ice Holy Land, they would still encounter the counterattack of the restrictions and be in danger. Therefore, generally speaking, the disciples of the 5 extreme mysterious ice Holy Land entered the disciple region with their disciple identity card. If it was an ordinary cultivator, their identity card would only be issued after the 5 extreme mysterious ice Holy Land's opening ended. But this time, Kong Shin-mu and Xiao Bai's identity cards were manufactured in a hurry, and they were issued to them that very night. Elder Li Hua first brought Xiao Bai to the 3rd-class disciples' residential area. Kong Shin-mu also followed them. Through the space-time array, he discovered that the 3rd-class disciples' residential area was almost like a paradise. It should be located not far behind the 5 extreme mysterious ice Holy Land. It was a place with verdant hills and limpid waters. Dense heaven and earth spirit chi and dragon mark energy constantly lingered in the surroundings. Every 3rd-class disciple's residential area was a wooden house in the mountains. These wooden houses had some restrictions carved on them, and with the 3rd-class disciples' abilities, it was impossible for them to destroy them. Every 2 wooden houses were at least 100 miles apart. And within 100 miles of the wooden house was the residence of a 3rd-class disciple. There was a spirit-gathering array in this place, constantly gathering heaven and earth spirit chi and dragon mark energy, allowing people to cultivate. Moreover, within 100 miles of each wooden house, there was a layer of restrictions. Without the permission of the disciple, outsiders could not enter, even if it was a disciple of a higher rank. Therefore, it could be said that cultivating in the Holy Land was something that every dragon martial artist yearned for. The conditions here were simply too good. Kong Shin-mu discovered that in the 3rd-class disciples' residential area, the density of the dragon mark energy was more than 20 times higher than the dragon martial continent's Heaven's Pivot District, even reaching about 25 times. Cultivating and absorbing the dragon mark energy here allowed one's speed and efficiency to reach the extreme. For a dragon martial artist like Xiao Bai, after absorbing a day's worth of dragon mark energy here, she could digest it for 3 days, and then wait for the next 3 days for the spirit gathering array to condense the dragon mark energy again. And if she went to a higher ranked disciple's residential area, the higher the grade of the spirit gathering array, the faster the dragon mark energy would be condensed. Following that, Xiao Bai familiarized herself with the 3rd-class disciple's residential area. As for Kong Shin-mu, he was brought to the 5th-class disciples' residential area by Elder Li Hua. This was a magnificent palace located in the middle of the white clouds. Within a radius of 300 miles around the palace was the residential area of a 5th-class disciple. There were restrictions around the perimeter, other disciples could not enter, and the grade of the spirit gathering array was even higher. 1st-class disciples' residences were on the ground, and the higher-ranked disciples' residences, the closer they were to the sky. Now, the residences of the 5th-class disciples were all luxurious palaces floating in midair. Kong Shin-mu could feel that the total amount of dragon mark energy contained in a 5th-class disciple's residential area was more than 10 times that of a 3rd-class disciple's residential area, and the gathering speed of the spirit gathering array was also more than 5 times faster. In other words, if Xiao Bai came here, she might need 10 days to completely absorb the dragon mark energy, and she would need 5 or 6 days to condense it again. This was the power of the 5 extreme mysterious ice Holy Land. The higher the disciple's residential area, the higher the concentration of dragon mark energy and heaven and earth spiritual chi, making cultivation twice the result with half the effort. Cultivating in Kong Shin-mu's place for half a month was probably equivalent to cultivating in the dragon martial continent for a year. Even compared to the 3rd-class area where Xiao Bai resided, it was still 2 or 3 times faster. This was undoubtedly an extremely terrifying speed. Of course, it also depended on the dragon martial artist's own talent. No matter how good the outside world's conditions were, if one's talent was lacking, it would be very difficult for a dragon martial artist to improve. Of course, in a situation where one's talent was the same, the resources they enjoyed were different, which would lead to the difference between the two's achievements. Elder Li Hua brought Kong Xinmu over and left. As for Kong Xinmu, he first familiarized himself in his own palace. On the second day, Elder Li Hua sent someone to bring Kong Xinmu's cultivation resources over. There was a darkness attribute spiritual chi essence worth 800 gold dragon coins, and a primordial overlord body beast's beast core worth 130 gold dragon coins. Chapter 4699. Kong Xinmu didn't waste any time after receiving these materials. He immediately started to absorb them. Of course, his method of absorption was devouring. This was his unique method of improvement. Others might only be able to absorb 30%, 50%, or at most 70% of the darkness-attributed spiritual energy essence, and that would already be considered a super genius. However, Jiang Shenwu could absorb 100% of it. As the darkness attribute spiritual energy essence was completely absorbed into Kong Xinmu's body, Kong Xinmu had a new understanding of the dragon martial technique, the 9th extreme Dao Hui Long Burst. It was mainly because he had a unique feeling towards the power of darkness. Therefore, when he used the 9-stage extreme Dao Roaring Dragon Burst, he was able to use it more easily. Moreover, it was more in line with the feeling of the power of darkness, and it was in harmony with the world. In 3 days, Kong Xinmu absorbed all the darkness attribute spiritual energy essence that was worth 800 gold dragon coins. The absorption of all the spiritual energy essence was a great improvement for Kong Xinmu. However, he still needed more time to break through the 9th extreme Dao Hui Long Burst from the 3rd extreme Dao Hui Long Burst to the 4th extreme Dao Hui Long Burst. It wasn't a trivial matter to consolidate and digest all the energy. He couldn't rush it. But right after that, Kong Xinmu started to devour the energy of the prehistoric tyrant body beast's beast core. He only used it for 2 days to devour all the energy. The digestion of the energy was much faster. It could even be said to be a rough digestion. As everyone knew, in order to cultivate the dragon martial technique faster, the most important thing was to keep getting injured. In the process of recovery, one could break through to the next level. This time, the beast core of the prehistoric tyrant body beast contained extremely violent energy. Kong Xinmu couldn't bear it at all. He devoured the energy into the devouring space and released it bit by bit for himself to absorb. Every time he released enough energy, he was on the verge of death. His whole body was on the verge of disintegration. The violent energy from the prehistoric tyrant body beast was too much for Kong Xinmu to bear. Under normal circumstances, it would take several years to completely absorb this energy. However, Kong Xinmu directly devoured it all. Although most of it was still stored in the devouring space, he still wanted to absorb about 10% of the total energy each time. This power was enough to tear Kong Xinmu's divine dragon body into pieces. Fortunately, Kong Xinmu controlled the degree of release of his power, so that he was always on the edge of life and death, and did not directly die. This caused his divine dragon body to become tougher and tougher in the process of continuous recovery. The terrifying tyrant body power grew in his body, becoming stronger and stronger, and harder to control. At this moment, his divine dragon tyrant body technique also began to advance towards the sage tier. 5 days was too short. However, Kong Xinmu had already devoured all the cultivation resources into the devouring space, so he could slowly comprehend it. Later in the battle, it was very likely that he would achieve a breakthrough in these 2 dragon martial skills. If he could achieve a breakthrough at a critical moment, it could save his life. 5 days later, it was almost time for him to set off. He first rested for 2 hours, so that he was in his best state of mind. Then, he went to visit Xiao Bai and set off with Xiao Bai. The two passed through the space-time portal of the Holy Lands of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice City, intending to go to the Gu family to look for the Gu family. When they arrived at the Gu family, the two found that the Gu family was decorated with lanterns and streamers, and it was very lively. They were actually celebrating someone. Naturally, they were celebrating that Gu Xinyue had successfully become a 6th-class disciple of the Holy Lands of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice. This was an amazing breakthrough for the Gu family. Indeed, the head of the Gu family, who was also Gu Xinyue's father, was now an advanced 2nd-class super divine dragon, and an 8th-class disciple of the Holy Lands of 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice. However, Gu Xinyue was still young, and she already had such achievements. In the future, she would probably be able to lead the Gu family to greater heights. When Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai arrived at the Gu family, they were warmly welcomed by the Gu family. Gu Xinyue and Gu Qinglian, the two people with the highest statuses among the younger generation of the Gu family, personally came to welcome them. However, there was an unexpected person among the people who came to welcome them, which surprised Kong Xinmu. It was the fifth-class disciple of the Holy Lands of Five Extremes Mysterious Ice, Yu Zhanfeng. His father was Yu Xiaoyao, who had just become a ninth-class disciple. Of course, Yu Xiaoyao didn't come this time. Otherwise, with his status, he would have overshadowed the host. However, since Yu Zhanfeng came, it meant that Yu Xiaoyao also attached great importance to the Gu family's banquet. It could even be said that Yu Xiaoyao might have taken a fancy to Gu Xinyue, and wanted to matchmake Gu Xinyue and Yu Zhanfeng. This matter had nothing to do with Kong Xinmu. Yu Zhanfeng, Gu Xinyue, and Gu Qinglian went to the entrance of the Gu family's residence to welcome them. They saw Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai. "Please come in." Gu Xinyue was very polite. After all, the Gu family had invited Kong Xinmu and Xiao Bai over to bring the younger generation of the Gu family to explore the supreme ruins. This was a big matter. As for Yu Zhanfeng, he sized up Kong Xinmu warily. In his opinion, any young genius could become his rival in love. If Gu Xinyue and Jiang Shenwu had a deeper level of contact, perhaps he would make a move to obstruct them. Of course, even if he wanted to interfere, he wouldn't do it openly. He would act according to the situation. There was even a possibility that Kong Xinmu wouldn't be able to return alive from the supreme ruins. That was also possible. Therefore, Yu Zhanfeng might not treat Kong Xinmu as a true rival. To him, Kong Xinmu wasn't a threat. Of course, he was still very shocked by Kong Xinmu's talent. Originally, the opening of the Sacred Tower of Five Extremes Mysterious Ice was the most shocking event when his father, Yu Xiaoyao, became a grade 9 disciple. But then, Kong Xinmu appeared out of nowhere. He actually used the grade of the Divine Dragon's inheritance blood from the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor to reach 95 points. In the end, an exception was made and he became a grade 5 disciple. That was simply terrifying. One had to know what grade a grade 5 disciple was. The grade 5 disciples of the Sacred Tower of Five Extremes Mysterious Ice were basically all at the 9th level of the Dragon Emperor. Kong Xinmu was only at the 4th level of the Dragon Emperor, but the cultivation resources and treatment he enjoyed were already at the 9th level of the Dragon Emperor. It could be seen how highly valued his talent was. Moreover, it was said that Emperor Shi had already sent news that he wanted to recruit Kong Xinmu as a disciple. Although Emperor Shi couldn't return for the time being, the news had spread. That meant that Kong Xinmu's identity wasn't ordinary. Originally, Yu Zhanfeng felt that his father, Yu Xiaoyao, becoming a grade 9 disciple was already something that brought honor to his ancestors. To Gu Xinyue, Yu Zhanfeng was the best candidate. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.